Chapter 52. If they raised a flag and rebelled, they would definitely win at the starting line with the resources. In fact, that was indeed the case. If all the things in the book were converted into money, it would be several times richer than the national treasury of Dongqing. She really didn't know how Lu Shi had managed to amass such a large net worth without alerting anyone. Jiang Pengji suppressed her inner thoughts. Although she had only glanced at it a few times, she had memorized every single word on it. It was a pity that she could not understand the prices at that time, so she was not clear about the specific value of the contents. Marriage? Jinger? The Weiss have other plans. Her temperament is not suitable for you, so they will probably call off the marriage soon. Then, to protect her reputation, my son may have to suffer. Lu Shi sneered. He knew the Weiss plans like the back of his hand. The Weiss had insisted on keeping the marriage even though their second son was dead. They did not want Jingxian to be known as a jinx to her husband. But the two families could not let their daughters marry each other, could they? Even though it was part of Lu Shi's plan, he was still unhappy. Therefore, the Weiss should speak up and discuss the cancellation of the marriage. Jiang Pengji was not surprised. In this situation, women are always at a disadvantage. I'm fine. They knew that she was a woman, but they still married their daughter to Jiang Pengji. That family was either stupid or plotting something, or there was something wrong with the woman. Lu Shi calmly covered his trembling hands with his sleeves to hide his loss of composure. If Jiang Pengji had been a man, Lu Shi might have felt that his son was magnanimous and open-minded. But she was a girl. Why did it feel weird to hear her say that? Was it not good for his daughter to be such a man? Lu Shi raised his eyelids and said, "Oh, it's not easy to humiliate my son. I won't let them take advantage of me." If the marriage was cancelled when they were young, the man would bear most of the pressure. How could he be willing to do such a disadvantageous thing? Lu Shi was not a picky person, but he hated being at a disadvantage since he was young. The Weiss had to show their sincerity. Jiang Pengji was speechless. She secretly poked at the system and muttered to herself, "I think this cheap father is a little two-faced." The system said, "Host, how can you say that about others? Take a look at your own color first." Jiang Pengji's style was very similar to Lu Shi's. Who wouldn't believe that they were father and daughter? Perhaps it was because he was getting older, but Lu Shi's health wasn't as good as it was when he was young. After a few coughs, his eyes were bloodshot. He looked a little listless. He looked weak under the flickering candlelight. "Did you dismiss some guards a few days ago?" Jiang Pengji was practicing calligraphy under Lu Shi's guidance. She felt that it was much more efficient than fumbling around on her own. She stopped writing and looked up at him. "Yes, it's just a few unscrupulous and crafty ones. I threw them to the old butler and sold them." Lu Shi's question was not meant to reprimand her. "Although our mansion is small, we can't be short of guards. Tomorrow, you will follow the butler to buy some useful servants. Come back and write a plan for me. Write whatever comes to your mind. The more detailed, the better." Lu Shi paused and continued, "In recent years, natural and man-made disasters have been happening. Refugees and bandits have fled everywhere. Even Hejian County is not peaceful. If it weren't for your quick thinking, I'm afraid you wouldn't have been able to get out of that situation so easily. I've thought about it. Coincidentally, we have some surplus food. If you're interested, you can take it to feed your troops and keep it for self-defense." Jiang Pengji's eyebrows twitched even more. Troops? According to her understanding, troops were considered private troops. They were equivalent to guards or servants. Not to mention the aristocratic families, even the gentry with some surplus food would feed them. The reason was similar to what Lu Shi had said. The current situation was not stable. One could encounter several groups of robbers and murderers when they went out. Some small places would even be looted by bandits. If one did not have some strength, he would not even know how he died. Now that the aristocratic families were powerful, the emperor was afraid of them. Another reason was that the aristocratic families had a lot of troops in their hands. Of course, for ordinary people, troops were servants and guards. But for Jianghu, they were King private troops. Even though you're a boy in name, you're still a girl. You must have some means to protect yourself. Lu Shi sighed and took out a small piece of paper from his sleeve. He carefully unfolded it and showed it to her. Look at this. It's never wrong to prepare for a rainy day. Jianghu took the paper and glanced at it. She immediately understood Lu Shi's intention. The content was actually very simple. The emperor also wanted to negotiate with the second prince to marry the princess of the northern borderline, but the decision had not been made public. She did not know which high-ranking official in the imperial court Lu Shi was in contact with to get first-hand information. Purchasing servants was the responsibility of the mistress of the house. It was within the scope of the inner court. A man like Jianghu should not interfere. But since Lu Shi had spoken, it was obviously a test. How could the second mistress not agree? As for Madame Hu, she only sent a servant girl to pass on a message. She would listen to her cousin. The next day, the old housekeeper came back with 2 booklets. Master said that everything today will be decided by the second Langjun. Jianghu took the booklet and glanced at it. She asked, "Are these the records of the purchasing servants in the manor in recent years?" She realized that the bookkeeping habits of the Lu manor were very different from those outside. They were more clear and organized, and they were in tabular format. It clearly recorded the value of the buyer, as well as their name and background. Some of the buyers were even from the same family. It even recorded their current positions and specialties. She flipped through it and, with her strong memory, memorized all the names of the servants inside and outside the Lu residence. Needless to say, this bookkeeping format must have been created by Lu Shi's mother. It would be much more convenient to use it to manage the inner court. The old housekeeper stood with his hands in front of his chest. He looked calm. Yes. These are the records of the changes in the servants in the manor in recent years. Of the 2 booklets, one was the records of the past few years, and the other was brand new. She did not even have to think to know what it was used for. If that's the case, I'll follow the old rules and go to the broker house first. She did not know how many broker houses there were in Hejin County, so it was better to start with the ones she was familiar with. At least the possibility of being deceived would be lower. If it was any other day, she would have asked the broker house to bring the servants to the manor and then she could take her time to choose. But it was a test set by Lu Shi that day. Thinking of the conversation with the people the night before, Jianghu decided to go out on her own and learn about the prices outside. What she heard from others and what was written in books was not as convincing as seeing it with her own eyes. Chapter 53. The old housekeeper was very pleased to hear this. His wrinkled old face finally smoothed out, and he looked a little more relaxed. In fact, he was quite worried that the second Langjun, who had always been cooped up at home, would give out orders for the first time without knowing anything. Messing things up was secondary. The Lu residents didn't care about the damage caused, but they were afraid that master wouldn't like them. After all, he had watched Lu Shi grow up. The old housekeeper hoped that Lu Shi and his son would be closer to each other. Jianghu changed into plain clothes before she left. She sat in the carriage and occasionally lifted the curtain to look outside. Turning on the live stream mode, she casually glanced around and found that there were 3,000 viewers in the live stream room waiting for today's live stream. Unfortunately, as a first-class streamer, Jianghu's streaming room could only accommodate 3,000 viewers. If she wanted to increase the upper limit, she would have to upgrade. However, leveling up would require a huge amount of popularity points. She could only save them for now and could not spend them. Playing with the sandalwood fan in his hand, he sat upright in the carriage. When he raised his head, several comments from the audience appeared on the screen. "Oh Huang Sai Gao, I was scared to death. I thought the streamer was going to open the window today, so I cut the screen and came over. Nongfu Shanquan Yudiangshuan, why is the screen shaking? Bai Gue Yeshing, TSK, the streamer is obviously in the carriage. Can the screen not shake? Yimi Yangguang, not everyone has the right to sit in the carriage in ancient times. Even poor merchants don't have the right. The host's status is quite high. If this carriage was in our hands, it would be a Maserati worth a few million, right? Although it was a horse carriage, the interior of the carriage was quite complete. Not only was there a table, but there was also a hidden box with the 4 treasures of the study and snacks to pass the time. If he was tired of sitting, he could still lean on the table to relax. If he was sleepy, he could still sleep. Of course, this was not the main point. The main point was the advanced shock absorption system inside the carriage. Before she boarded the carriage, she noticed that the structure of the carriage was different from the ones she had seen before. The shock absorption system was more complete. However, when he thought about the butterfly hairpin he saw in the second madam's room, it also had springs on it. It meant that Mother Lu had experimented with this thing before. In order to pursue comfort, it didn't seem impossible to use springs on the carriage to make a shock absorber system. Wazwa bai, today's host is still as handsome as ever, */w***. On the screen, Jiang Pengji was dressed in a green silk robe. The cuffs of her robe were embroidered with delicate auspicious clouds. A piece of white jade hung on her waist. The sandalwood fan in her hand occasionally closed and opened with a swoosh as she moved lazily. She tapped the palm of her hand with the fan. Tudu Feichio, is the host going to school? Host V, no, I've dealt with a lot of guys because of the previous incident. Now I'm going to the broker house to buy some servants to look after the yard. Buyer D? Wasn't that human beings being bought and sold? Even though they knew that such transactions were common in ancient times and that it was only natural when they read novels, many felt that it was a little strange when they watched the live stream. However, they could not find fault with Jiang Pengji's actions. Lu Lanting's body was too weak. Even though she was sitting in the carriage, her back was sore from sitting on her knees for a long time. She leaned on the table and thought about the summary she would write to Lu Shi after choosing the servants. After a while, the old housekeeper lowered his voice and said, "Second Lang Jun, we're here." There were many officially approved brokers in Hejian County, but the one that was closest to the Lus and had a good reputation was the one in front of her. Jiang Pengji put away her sandalwood fan and glanced at the plaque hanging on the door. I can't tell that this is a broker house just by looking at the door. Of course, when she entered, she found an even more interesting scene. The interior was decorated like a normal merchant's house. She whispered to the old housekeeper, "It's different from what I imagined. I thought it would be dirty and messy." The old housekeeper stood with his hands by his side and said in a serious tone, "Broker houses are divided into different levels. The kind you mentioned is probably the lowest of the lowest. They specialize in cheating and forcing people to buy and sell. The people they hire are of unknown origins. There's no way the Lu's family would want those kinds of servants." More importantly, the old housekeeper did not have the guts to bring Jiang Pengji to that kind of place. If they met someone who thought that they were easy to bully because of their plain clothes, they might get bullied. That's true. The difference between a licensed business and an unlicensed business is always different, Jiang Pengji replied with a smile. Under normal circumstances, when a rich family wanted to buy a servant, they would directly send a steward to the broker house to inform them. There were people like Jiang Pengji who came to the house herself, but most of them were from poor families. When the woman broker heard the news, she thought there was something wrong with her ears. Of course, when she saw the old housekeeper of the Lus, she immediately went up to him. "What kind of wind blew you here today?" The woman broker was plump and strong, with a fierce-looking face. Her hair was pinned with a bright red silk flower, and she wore a shiny golden ornament that shone brightly under the sunlight. Just by standing there, she exuded a rich aura. The old housekeeper was tall, but because of his old age, he looked a little thin. Compared to the old woman broker, he was like a bamboo pole. The old housekeeper secretly rejected the old woman broker's flattery. He raised his brows and said, "I have business to attend to today. Be careful not to offend you." After all, he was the housekeeper of the Lus residence. He knew almost everyone who had dealings with the Lus, including the old woman broker. The smile on the old woman broker's face froze for a moment. But in the blink of an eye, she smiled even more brightly. She secretly looked at Jiang Pengji. In Hejin County, there were many rich families in a small place. Generally speaking, the Lus were not the top big shot, but everyone knew that the second branch of the Lus was rich. The famous bamboo paper workshop and several prosperous bookstores were all owned by the second branch. There were also other restaurants and restaurants. The owner came in person. This was a big deal. The old woman broker had been in the business world for many years. What kind of people had she not seen? To be able to do business like this, she must have some tricks up her sleeves. She had an idea. She quickly led Jiang Pengji and her servant to the seats of honor. Then she lowered her posture and knelt down. She looked flattering and respectful. Jiang Pengji opened her sandalwood fan and asked the old woman broker, "How many boys between 10 and 30 years old do you have here? They must be healthy, clean, and have a clean background. They must not have committed crimes. Because we are buying guards, if they are skilled, the price can be increased. It would be best if they were adult men." She just needed to teach them some martial arts. But if she formed her own private army, she would be too old. There was not much room for her to teach them. Chapter 54. Servants. The woman broker was startled and turned to look at the old housekeeper. Jiang Pengji saw it and frowned. She closed the sandalwood fan in her hand and tapped it on her palm. She asked coldly, "Is there a problem?" In the blink of an eye, her cold eyes were filled with unfriendliness. It was as if a huge rock was pressing on people's hearts, making them feel depressed. Although the broker house had official permission and was a legitimate business, it was still making dirty money from human trafficking. In this line of work, who could compare to them when it came to the ability to adapt to the situation and speak the right words for the right people? The woman broker in front of them was a leader in the industry. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to run the business to such an extent. But now it was strange. The woman trader was almost suffocated by Jiang Pengji's imposing manner. She had no choice but to lower her stout body. Sweat was dripping from her forehead like greasy oil, and the silk flowers in her hair were trembling because of her movements. Nongfu Shanquan Yudiangshuan, excuse me? So the streamer is going to choose servants today? Yingbasin Sangwashan, ha ha ha, there is hope to sleep with all the officials and generals. The streamer is going to have a private troop. Yimi Yangguang, but it's strange. Why did the woman broker react like that when the streamer said she wanted to buy servants? Not only did the audience want to know the answer, but Jiang Pengji was also confused. However, seeing the old housekeeper's expression, she suddenly understood the cause and effect. She smiled and added, "By the way, the servants sold by the Lus don't need to be sent to me." Most of the servants sold by the Lus had been sent to the broker house. Why was the woman broker so surprised? In fact, if one thought about it, it was understandable. As long as one had some foundation, the guards in the house were all born in the house. They were guaranteed to be loyal to the master. For a guard like this who went out to buy things, not only did he not have a clean background, but his loyalty was also a problem. The Lus were not prosperous, but they had been around for hundreds of years. Jiang Pengji came out to buy servants, so of course the woman broker would be surprised. At that moment, the old housekeeper calmly spoke and dispelled the woman broker's doubts. He then went to pick the suitable servants. As a small role model in the industry, the middleman's ability to handle matters was commendable. In just a short while, she had already gathered enough people. Granny Broker said fawningly, replying to Lang Jun, "Your servant has brought them here. They are all waiting in the courtyard." Her voice was so sweet that it could almost cause diabetes. If her body was not still trembling unconsciously, she would probably sound more natural. This is really strange. I thought it was a big deal, so I walked over eagerly. Who knew that when I met the young man's eyes, I actually felt as if my clothes were being stripped off, and even the color of my heart was being seen by the other party. My whole body felt cold. Jiang Pengji looked at the woman broker's unnatural posture. Her pale lips curled into a faint smile. She stood up and said, "Then let's go and take a look. If they're not to your liking, I'll have to trouble you to find another group of people." Of course. In the whole of Hejin County, there is no better broker house than mine. The old woman broker patted her chest and promised. The people waiting to be selected were all in the yard. The woman trader eagerly led the way and hinted, "Is there anyone else you want to look at?" Granny broker? What was her task? If the officials or the rich wanted to buy their favorite concubines, singers, dancers, cooks, needlework, or rough servants, they would look for a female broker. This was where the real profit came from. For example, the servants and attendants, although the price was high, they were rarely sold. The housekeeper was old, but his ears were sharp. He almost blew his beard and stared at Jiang Pengji. Jiang Pengji was not a decent person. She raised her eyebrows and said in a flirtatious manner, "What is there to look at in your place?" Seeing that there was a chance, the old woman broker suddenly became spirited. She strongly recommended, "Lang Jun, don't be fooled by my small shop, but the quality is excellent. Even the top girls in Lang Lang Alley came from here. They are all first-class beauties." Lang Lang Alley sounded weird, but it was actually the red light district, a place that could not be spoken of. "Oh. Is that true?" Ignoring the old housekeeper's awkward cough, Jiang Pengji smiled and pretended to be very interested. "I've heard people talk about the girls in Lang Lang Alley. I heard that they are not only beautiful, but also talented. I was wondering which master had the ability to train and teach them well. I didn't expect them to be right in front of me." The housekeeper was speechless. "Yimi Yangguang, I didn't expect you to be such a hardcore streamer. You even teased the granny broker." When Jiang Pengji praised someone, she liked to look them in the eye. Her eyes were like a pool of crystal clear water, full of sincerity. People could not help but believe what she said. Even the granny broker, who was used to seeing the world, felt a little embarrassed. The housekeeper braced himself and said in a low voice, "Second Lang Jun, everyone loves beauty. If I can bring home a beautiful girl, won't I be happy to look at her every day?" The old housekeeper was speechless. He had a bad feeling. His second Lang Jun wouldn't go to Lang Lang Alley just to look at a beautiful girl, would he? As they spoke, the three of them arrived at the courtyard. There were a few rows of people standing in the open space. They were arranged according to their height. Although they were wearing coarse linen clothes with a few patches, these people's spirits and appearance were considered good. Their skin didn't seem to have much dirt. Regardless of their appearance, they gave a good first impression. The broker house had been doing well in Hejin County for many years. It was reasonable that it was doing better than other brokers. "Do you have any records of these people's backgrounds?" Jiang Pengji walked to the front of the crowd and glanced at each of them. A lot of information appeared in her mind, but it was quickly digested. She had already made a decision. As a broker house, it was natural to have a lot of information on the goods. The records were not complicated, but they were piled up without order. It was not as clear as the account books of the loos. She was not picky. She flipped through it quickly. People who did not know would think that she was fanning herself with it. The granny broker was a little unhappy. She thought that Jiang Pengji would not be able to choose a good servant with such an attitude. Bracing herself, she pointed at a tall and sturdy man. He was the most powerful person in the group, and he had some skills. "Lang Jun, what do you think of this one? He's hardworking, honest, and clean. If it weren't for the fact that his parents passed away, he wouldn't have sold himself here." Even though the granny broker was evil, she did not dare to trick Jiang Pengji. Under normal circumstances, the strong man would be a good choice, but Jiang Pengji did not like him. "Oh, no need. I'll get rid of him," Jiang Pengji said without looking up. His parents died because of his laziness. Everyone was speechless. Chapter 55. Genius 1 second. Remember love go away? We provide you with exciting novels to read. Although he had muscles that looked scary, who was Jiang Pengji? She could tell at a glance whether they were real or not. They were muscles that had been trained through a lot of labor. That strong man had good genes and a good body given by his parents, but his steps were weak. She could easily send 2 of them flying with one slap. He had lived in the wilderness for 2 years in his hometown. His fingers did not have many calluses, and the skin on his arms was even. There were no signs of farming or hunting. The woman broker said that his parents had passed away and he had to sell himself to pay for their burial. But according to her, that was not the case. As expected, when she casually said these words, the expression in the man's eyes changed. They were filled with fear and cowering. Although the woman broker did not know how Jianghu knew, she also felt embarrassed. What was the scariest thing for a person in her line of business? Wasn't it because the goods were not right? Her reputation was ruined, and she lost her source of income. She thought that the person she recommended was a good one and that Jianghu could see her honesty. She did not expect to be slapped in the face in public. Eliminate this one as well. Eating, drinking, whoring, and gambling are more reliable than me. Do you think you can be a boss after buying him? The woman broker's mouth twitched. She almost tore the handkerchief in her hand in half. She was going to recommend the one Jianghu pointed at. The man was in his 20s. He had a good physique. He had read a few words in his childhood. He was smart and had a good eye for people. Logically speaking, he was a good man. She did not expect the man in front of her to tell her the inside story that she did not know. Jianghu said, "He has a hidden injury in his ankle. It's not obvious when he walks slowly, but it's obvious when he walks quickly. How can he guard the house?" The woman broker was dumbfounded again. The people she had chosen had to be healthy. After all, they were hired to guard the house. Other standards could be set aside for now, but their physical conditions had to be up to standard. Otherwise, how could they protect the master's family? But, looking at the man's evasive eyes, the woman broker knew that Jianghu was telling the truth. And this one, Nongnan, Tong. The Lius don't dare to take in such a scumbag. It's disgusting. Under the watchful eyes of the woman trader, Jianghu eliminated a few people in a row. She gave a variety of reasons, which stunned everyone. After a round of screening, Jianghu glanced at the remaining people and said to them, "Stretch out your right hand." The people of this era had poor physical fitness and poor bones. It was impossible for Jianghu to use the standards of her previous life to filter them, but she would choose the tallest among the shortest. With her eyesight, she could filter out those with problems, and the rest would depend on their aptitude. Sleeping all over 3 kingdoms male god, the streamer knows how to feel bones? There were many classic plots in novels where one would feel one's bones to determine one's aptitude. How would one do that? In fact, Jianghu did not know how to feel bones, but she had seen a lot and had her own way of identifying aptitudes. If one were to insist that this was bone touching, the essence was more or less the same. However, she didn't need to touch it herself. Just by looking at his arm, she could roughly visualize the skeleton in her mind. In other words, if she wanted to, any creature in her eyes would be nothing more than a skeleton. Host V, no, but the skeleton can indeed be used as a basis to determine one's aptitude and potential, but it cannot be regarded as the final basis. At most, it can be regarded as a reference. Depending on the body, the state of development, and the state of the skeleton will be different, which will interfere with the judgment. For a warrior, aptitude is not as important as temperament and willpower. The latter can sometimes create impossible miracles. Sleeping all over 3 kingdoms male god, how many people do you plan to choose? Host V, the quality of the soldiers is more important than the quantity. I'll train a few guards first, and then we'll talk about the future. Jianghu had read military strategies a few days ago, and she had also read some books related to the battlefield. She had even asked Lu Shi himself. After combining the information from various sources, she had a general understanding of the war in this era. If the information showed that the first party had 200,000 soldiers and the second party had 150,000 soldiers, and there was a huge disparity between the two sides, which side had the highest probability of winning? Excluding factors like timing, geographical, and human conditions, most people would think that the first party had a high probability of winning. In fact, the ratio of winning and losing was basically 50-50. Even if the first party had an advantage, it was not a big one. In the war in this era, it did not mean that the side with more people had a higher probability of winning. In fact, that was not the case. On the surface, there were as many as 350,000 people on both sides, but the number of people that really determined the outcome of the war was probably less than 50,000. The real competition was between the elite soldiers, and the ratio was very small. The rest of the soldiers were just bystanders. The weapons in their hands were just sharpened tree trunks, and they wore coarse linen clothes. Those who were slightly better would be wrapped in leather armor. Their defense was basically zero. The elites of the first and second parties would fight against each other. Based on the situation of the battlefield, if the winning side's morale was high, the bystanders would rush forward aggressively. If the winning side lost, the bystanders would definitely run away faster than anyone else. They would flee in panic. There were many cases in history where the few won against the many. Excluding factors like timing, geographical, and human conditions, there was a lot of water in the water. Considering these problems, if Jianghu really wanted to raise some troops, she would, of course, go the route of elite soldiers. Of course, the elite soldiers were still very ugly in her eyes. If it was her in the past, she could kill a bunch of them with one slap. This one, and this one. Stay here and record them in the booklet, Jianghu picked and chose. In the end, there were only a few people left in the yard. Most of them were teenagers under the age of 15. There were only a few young men, and there were less than 15 of them in total. Are they all here? Jianghu looked around with some dissatisfaction. She turned to the woman broker and asked, "It seems like there are not enough people." The old housekeeper was worried at first, but as Jianghu picked, he was finally relieved. All that was left in his heart was relief. Although the style was not quite the same, the second Langjun really had the demeanor of the old master when he was young. The woman broker hesitated. She was also afraid of the young master. He was very evil. There are some, but they are not very suitable for Langjun's requirements. Some of them have a criminal background. There were many kinds of goods in the broker house. Some were children from good families who sold themselves, some were sold by relatives, some were slaves who had committed crimes and were bought from the government, and some were servants who had been sold in other mansions. Criminal background? Jianghu raised her eyebrows. She had thought that she could choose enough people, so she set the requirements more strictly. She did not expect that after the selection, there were only about a dozen people who were barely satisfied. Obviously, the number of people was very limited. Bring them here to have a look. The old housekeeper was not calm anymore. He could not let those dangerous people with criminal records get close to his Langjun. Jianghu knew what he was thinking, so she spoke first to stop him from saying anything. "I'm just going to have a look. We'll talk about it later if I'm satisfied." Chapter 56. If it was just to guard the house, Jianghu would definitely not use those with criminal records. After all, she had to think about the safety of the Liu family. But if it was to train private soldiers, that was another matter. She had yet to meet a troublemaker that she could not handle. Deep in her bones was a spirit that loved to pursue thrills and thrills. Sometimes, it could even be said to be sick. She remembered in her previous life, before she became the commander of the army, her superior trained her, but he also had a headache because of her temper. Every now and then, she would see a psychiatrist for guidance. The psychiatrist did not alleviate her mental symptoms, and she almost drove them crazy. After all, not everyone had strong psychological endurance. They could not accept a stranger flipping them over the moment they met. Under the sharp gaze of the old housekeeper, the broker ordered the goods that were difficult to sell to be brought over. Almost everyone wore shackles on their hands and feet. They did not look like the goods in the broker house. If they wore prison clothes, they would look like criminals. Are these all sold by the government? Jiang Pengji glanced at them. Half of them had tattoos on their faces. They had been branded. Some of them are official slaves. Some of them were originally sentenced to death, but they were lucky enough to be released due to an amnesty. Looking at those people who were either dead silent, mocking, or harboring evil intentions, the woman broker's intestines turned green with regret. Although she was in a hurry to get rid of them, if Jiang Pengji really liked some of them and brought them back, the Lus would definitely not let the broker house off. Love go little show net ku amnesty. Jiang Pengji searched her memory and found that there was indeed such a thing. The government was celebrating the birthday of his favorite concubine. In addition, the drought that had been on and off in Dongqing for more than half a year had been alleviated. Calculating the time, it should be early February. Under the nervous gaze of the old housekeeper, Jiang Pengji walked in a big circle and stopped in front of a young man who was about 16 or 17 years old. Sleeping Sangwa Shangshan, he's really good looking. I feel that his facial features are a bit similar to the little fresh meat that was popular some time ago. Tudu Feichio, sigh, I wouldn't have noticed if you didn't mention it. But this one looks more mature and manlier than those little fresh meats. In ancient times, one could start a family at the age of 13 or 14. At the age of 16 or 17, one would already be the father of a string of little kids. Naturally, one would be more mature and steady. However, Jiang Pengji's focus was not on looks. In fact, she was not very concerned about the looks of people other than women. Raise your head and let me see. Jiang Pengji did not use her hand to pinch his chin. Instead, she used the tip of her sandalwood fan to lift his chin. He seemed to dislike such a humiliating action, but his strength was no match for hers. What a pity, this was also a convict who had been branded. The tattoo mark was on the right side of his face near his ear. Because he hadn't taken good care of it, the wound had started to fester and ooze out a fishy yellow liquid. Some of his flesh had even rolled out, mixed with wisps of bright red. It looked quite horrifying. Yimi Yangguang, it looks even more like it from this angle. His eyes are so good // greater than over equal to for all, / perhaps it was the seduction of beauty. But Jiang Pengji's sharp eyes saw a row of lollipops and lovers' hearts floating across the screen. The young man who was forced to raise his chin slightly squinted his dark and bright eyes. His thick and long eyelashes trembled slightly, and his eyes seemed to hide a sharp blade. Being stared at by him made one feel a sense of dread, as if someone was stabbing their eyelids with a knife. His bloodless lips were dry and pale, and there were even some cracks. His cheeks were dyed a sickly red because of the heat. Because he raised his head, his neck was long and slender. His untidy collar was loose, revealing the delicate curves of his collarbone. The old housekeeper silently moved his eyes away. The scene was too beautiful for him to look at. The woman trader also sighed with regret. It is indeed a pity. Even if the wound on his face heals, it will still leave an ugly scar. At the moment, the trend was for fair and delicate beauty. Many gentry families pursued the fashion of putting flowers on their hair and applying powder. However, the public sense of beauty had not changed much. They were still very clear about the difference between beauty and ugliness. Although this young man looked more heroic, he was still a rare beauty. If his face was not ruined, he would definitely be very popular if he was sold to a brothel with his appearance. Lang Jun, stay away from him. Be careful of his illness. The old housekeeper stood aside and disapprovingly looked at the fan in Jiang Pengji's hand. She smiled and put away the sandalwood fan. Her eyes lingered on the young man. His eyes were full of unwillingness, as if he was an underage cub locked up in a cage. He had the ability to roar in the forest, but he was helpless against the reality. Woman trader, what did he do? The woman trader thought for a moment and said, he is from the county next door. His mother went out to buy vegetables and bumped into a noble. She was pushed and fell to the ground. Unfortunately, she hit her head and passed away. When he found out, he took a knife and went to seek revenge. He killed a servant and was arrested. Originally, he was sentenced to 30 years of exile, but the family refused to accept it. They used their connections to send him to the death row. Not only did he kill someone, but he also offended the nobles. That family would definitely use their connections to take his life. However, he was lucky enough to be granted amnesty. Because there was a reason for it, and the motive for the murder was out of filial piety, he was taken out of the death row prison and became a slave. He went back and forth a few times, and finally, he fell into her hands. The woman trader carefully suggested, "He is a thorn in the side. He is not easy to train. Why don't you look for someone else?" Jiang Pengji pursed her lips and smiled. She opened her fan and smiled. "No, I'll take him." The old housekeeper and the woman trader were speechless. Why did she hate him so much? It's hard to find someone who is literate. It's even harder to find someone who is literate and has some brains. It's just a few taels of silver. The young man glared at her. She could even hear him grinding his teeth. Jiang Pengji looked at the young man and smiled meaningfully. She was lucky, but the young man's luck was terrible. If it weren't for her, he could definitely escape from the broker house that night. He was only one step away from the long journey. But, such a prison break was nothing in front of her. At most, it would arouse her interest. What's his name? The woman trader's brain seemed to have short-circuited. She only regained her composure now and quickly answered, "His name is Su Ku." Jiang Pengji asked casually, "Do you have a courtesy name?" The young man had practiced martial arts, but there were thick calluses on his fingers from holding a brush. He must have studied for a long time. No matter who gave him his name, the scholars in ancient times should have a courtesy name. Jiang Pengji still did not understand why naming was so complicated. A name was a name. Why bother with a messy courtesy name? The woman trader could not answer. She secretly kicked Su Ku and glared at him fiercely. "Lang Jun asked you a question." Su Ku pursed his lips. The anger in his chest had not been extinguished, but the situation was against him. He could only suppress it for now. Chapter 57. Replying to Lang Jun, "My name is Xiaoyu." Su Ku lowered his head, trying not to let others see the hatred in his eyes. Jiang Pengji mocked, "Xiaoyu? Why wasn't it foolish filial piety? There's nothing wrong with avenging your mother, but have you become stupid after studying for so many years? You dare to pick up a knife and seek revenge just because you have some skills? It's fine if you can kill your enemy with your own hands, but you just let your enemy lose a dispensable servant, and you even lost yourself. This brain, why do I feel that buying you now is a bit of a loss? Tudu fecho, that's a slap in the face. Just half a minute ago, you said that buying him would be a good deal. Unlucky adventure welcomes you, streamer. I'm telling you, as long as you travel through time, you can definitely find a top talent in a broker house. I think this Su Ku is very promising underscore, smiley face 3 angle, underscore even if he's brainless, he can still warm the bed in the future. Maybe he's the male lead. Nongfu Shangquan Yudiangshuan. Why isn't it the female lead? Ignoring the young man who suddenly raised his head, she waved her hand, and someone naturally categorized Su Ku into the shopping column. After another round of picky choices, including Su Ku, she chose another 6 people. Including the previous ones, there were a total of 20 people. Have you memorized everything? Jiang Pengji asked the old housekeeper. Let's settle those people in the farm outside and train them well. The old housekeeper was a little upset, but his face was full of wrinkles, so it was impossible to see his expression. The old master had also said that Jiang Pengji would make all the decisions for the day, and he only needed to do what he was supposed to do. Lang Jun, I've noted everything down. By the way, buy 2 strong old maids, the kind that can cook big wok dishes. Jiang Pengji hadn't even taken 2 steps when she said to the woman broker, "It's best if they're hardworking and keep their mouths shut. Don't even consider those who like to cheat." The old housekeeper was puzzled. The Lu residence was not big, and there were only a few masters to serve. Therefore, there were enough servants for now. Jiang Pengji suddenly wanted to hire 2 more rough old women, but she did not know what to do with them. It was a big business for the broker house to buy 22 men at one time, not to mention that 20 of them were valuable men. The price of adult men was the highest, and the younger ones were slightly cheaper. The old women who did rough work could also be sold for 8 or 9 taels of silver. This was a legitimate business, and they still had to go to the government for an open road, so it wouldn't take much time. After settling the debt, Jiang Pengji received a stack of contracts from the woman broker. She took out Su Xiaoyu's contract. Tell the farm people to keep an eye on that Su Xiaoyu. Don't let him escape. Jiang Pengji put away the contract and smiled meaningfully. She reminded him, if you catch him in the middle of the night, remember to inform me immediately. If he's lost, I'll settle the score with you. After buying people from the broker house, Jiang Pengji had other things to do. Lu Shi's test was not over after buying people. There was a series of follow-up tasks. She had to know how to settle the people, daily training, and expenses. Speaking of expenses, she had to know the purchasing process and the prices of the goods. Only then could she use the budget more rationally. I feel like I was tortured by my boss. Jiang Pengji sat in the carriage. The table was covered with paper and a pen. She opened the new booklet given by the old housekeeper and recorded the name, identity, and purchase price of each servant in detail. The bullet screen was full of laughter. It was rare to see the streamer who had always been successful being defeated. They seized the time to have some fun. The farm's area is not small. We can let them farm while training. We can try to be self-sufficient, balance their income, and reduce their consumption. Clothes every season are another expense, and we also need to prepare the necessary training tools. In order to motivate them, we can set up a reward and punishment system. Jiang Pengji copied the draft she had already written on the bamboo paper. In the end, looking at the bamboo paper full of words, Jiang Pengji was finally satisfied. The next step was to understand the basic prices of goods, and try to use the budget she had to reduce unnecessary waste. Apart from these arrangements, she also had to come up with a training plan. Otherwise, how could she train a flock of sheep into real lions? Unfortunately, the genetic quality of the people in ancient times was not good, and their physical fitness was far from the standard of her era. Many of the popular training methods of the future could not be popularized. She could not mechanically copy them, so she could only adjust them according to the conditions of the current era. To put it more vividly, the difficulty of training for children in her era was like hell in this era. Jiang Pengji licked her lower lip expectantly. Her eyes were full of interest. She loved challenges like these. Every challenge could stimulate the calm and cool blood in her body. She could not help but be excited. I really can't wait. Tudu Feichio, why do I have a bad feeling? Looking at the streamer's smile, I feel the air around me turn cold. Yimi Yangguang, you're not alone. I feel cold too. I'm a newbie and I'm shivering. Should it be said that the purer a person is, the stronger their intuition? Looking at the bullet screen that flew past, Jiang Pengji was finally willing to restrain the emotions in her heart. She stopped smiling. It was the beginning of March, so the sky darkened early. Life in ancient times was boring. The rich could still light a lamp to read, listen to dramas, and find something to do to pass the time. Ordinary people, on the other hand, ate early and went to bed early. It was almost mealtime, so the housekeeper urged her to go back and eat with Lu Shi. Before Lu Shi came back, the Lius ate separately. But now that the master of the house was back, it was inappropriate for the family to eat separately. When she arrived at the main hall, Jiang Pengji was surprised to see Madame Hu, who usually stayed in her yard, sitting on the left side of Lu Shi. As for the second lady, she was still resting in her yard because of her health. Jiang Pengji bowed to Lu Shi with the etiquette of this era and nodded to Madame Hu. Coincidentally, the servants came in with the food. Third brother and second sister are eating in their own rooms? Jiang Pengji asked while the servants were still arranging the table. In this era, it was important not to talk while eating. The rules of the Lius were not as strict as those of the Lius, but basic etiquette was still important. If Jiang Pengji had any questions, she could only ask them before mealtime. Otherwise, she would have to stay silent until the end of the meal. Madame Hu looked down as if she was looking at the delicate embroidery on her clothes. Lu Shi frowned, but he did not speak. In the end, it was Madame Hu who broke the awkward silence with a smile. Third Lang Jun was too playful a few days ago and his face was disfigured. According to the doctor, he needs to rest in his room for a while and control his food intake. Otherwise, it will leave a scar. The second Nyangzi is still young and shy. She blushes easily when she talks too much. Cousin has always been serious. If he keeps a straight face, the girl will cry. Chapter 58. Lu Shi did not say a word throughout the meal, as if he had not heard the conversation between Jiang Pengji and Madame Hu. The meal was finished in silence. Perhaps it was the influence of Jiang Pengji's soul, but this body's appetite was much larger than Lu Lanting remembered. The cook's cooking skills were excellent, and even though the seasoning of this era was incomplete, it was more than enough for Jiang Pengji, who was used to tasteless energy agents. Lu Shi observed Jiang Pengji and noticed that she habitually squinted her eyes when she ate. She looked like a well-fed cat. He secretly noted down her preferences, so that he could ask the cook to make more of them in the future. Cousin, you still have the 2 wild children in the backyard? After Jiang Pengji left, Madame Hu followed Lu Shi into the main yard and sat down lazily at the table where Lu Shi practiced calligraphy. What wild children? Where did you learn to talk like that? Lu Shi frowned. Madame Hu was so lazy that the veins on her forehead were throbbing. His headache, which he had not felt for years, was back. Sit properly. Don't sway. Heh, I'm glad you didn't call them wild children. Madame Hu rested her chin on one hand and said before Lu Shi could lose his temper, Lanting doesn't know anything. Even though they are only brothers and sisters, they are related to her by blood, aren't they? If one day she feels that she has too few brothers and wants to get close to them, you won't be able to stop her. Lu Shi's eyes were still half closed, as if he did not take Madame Hu's words to heart. However, Madame Hu's sharp eyes noticed that Lu Shi's holding the brush was a little unsteady. It was only for a short moment, and if she was not familiar with Lu Shi's habits and temperament, it would have been difficult to notice. Love go little say net Lu Shi raised his eyelids and said coldly, that girl is very smart. Madame Hu finally sat up straight and said in agreement, that's true. She seems to have changed into a different person. She used to be as obedient as a sheep. If it weren't for the help of the East Courtyard, even a servant would be able to control her. Now, she's like a tiger cub who only eats humans. Lu Shi was silent for a while and echoed, like father, like daughter. Just like me. Madame Hu rolled her eyes in an ungraceful manner. I should say that he's more like you after you turn 12. Lu Shi was speechless. She tried to undermine him without a word and even dug up his dark history. Did she think that he could not see the ridicule in her eyes? The people of the older generation in Hejin County all knew that Lu Shi was as stupid as he could be when he was young. Not only was he stupid, but he was also very bad. He was clearly the second son of the first wife, but he had courted death so much that even the servants didn't like him. Whenever he was mentioned, they would look down on him. However, he had good eyesight. When he was 4 or 5 years old, he had his eyes on the legitimate wife's daughter of the Gu clan in Langya County. Taking advantage of his young age, he managed to become her childhood sweetheart. In terms of family background, the two families were well matched. Of course, that was the extent of it. Gu Min had been famous for her talent since she was young. She was beautiful and intelligent. She was a good helper in the household. When she was 6 years old, she could manage the household with the first lady. She could clean up any mess. On the other hand, Lu Shi was like mud that could not hold up a wall. He was simply a reckless prodigal. To put it bluntly, when the two of them were put together, it was like a toad wanting to eat swan meat. Lu Shi shamelessly stuck to the little girl. If they were not less than 7 years old, there might have been some gossip. Later, when Gu Min reached the age of marriage, Lu Shi begged his mother to sound her out. Then, reality slapped him hard in the face. Not to mention Lu Shi, a spoiled brat, even when the Xia kingdom was not destroyed, Gu Min would have been qualified to be the empress of the country. The spoiled brat Lu Shi only started to work hard after his marriage proposal was dealt a blow. He even ran to the Gu residence to seek an audience despite the heavy rain. He waited in the rain for an entire night and begged Gu Min to postpone the engagement for 2 years. He endured a high fever and made bold statements. It's the standard sweet ancient saying, childhood sweetheart route, adorable loyal dog, pretty girl, and so on, */W***. After that, Hejin County lost a spoiled brat and gained a quiet, black-hearted scholar, Lu Shi, who studied with all his might. As they were talking, the old housekeeper came to see them. Lu Shi remembered something important and quickly asked Madame Hu to sit up straight. "Come in." The old housekeeper came over to report Jiang Pengji's schedule for the day. At first, everything was fine. Lu Shi's expression changed slightly, but overall, it was a father's praise for his child. But when Jiang Pengji lifted Su Xiaoyu's chin with her folding fan, he was silent. Su Ku. The one who was branded and has a tattoo on his face. Is he Su Xiaoyu from Zisong County? Lu Shi asked uncertainly. The old housekeeper was confused. He had only said that the boy was called Su Ku. He did not mention his courtesy name or his background. How did the master know? Yes, the second Lang Jun took the slave contract alone. He was even sure that the boy would try to escape in the middle of the night. Lu Shi snorted. He's fickle and rebellious. How can you raise such a person? If Lanting said that he would escape in the middle of the night, he would definitely escape. There aren't many guards at the farm. If the guards are lax at night, he might really be able to escape. The old housekeeper did not understand his master. He asked hesitantly, then. Master, in your opinion, if Su Xiaoyu really escaped in the middle of the night, he would be an escaped slave. If he was caught, he could be killed immediately. In any case, Lanting spent a lot of money to buy it. How could you let it escape? Lu Shi had given Jiang Pengji a very limited amount of money to test her. If she spent it extravagantly, the servants she bought would probably be left with nothing to eat. At this point, Lu Shi suddenly revealed a smile that was very familiar to everyone. It made them shudder when they saw it. Every time he wanted to scheme against someone and make them unlucky, he would always smile like this. Over time, it scared people to the point that they developed a phobia. Send another team to guard the farm. If he escapes, break one of his legs. It will take him 100 days to recover. Let him stay put. The old housekeeper was a little surprised. An escaped slave did not need to be killed? Since when was his master so easy to talk to? The old housekeeper was about to leave when Lu Shi suddenly changed his mind. Lu Shi's changed order made the old housekeeper even more confused. Forget it. I'll go see Su Xiaoyu myself. As for Lanting, just let her know. There's no need to hide it from her. Madame Hu frowned and asked, what's Su Xiaoyu's background? Lu Shi smiled coldly. He's a wolf that bites and can't be tamed. Such a bad evaluation. Madame Hu looked down. Can't be tamed? But at least he can bite. He's better than a dog that only knows how to bark. Lu Shi understood that there was a hidden meaning in her words, but he did not respond. Madame Hu waited patiently for a while. Finally, she snorted, stood up, and left. The room was silent. Lu Shi sighed and muttered, spoils him, but his temper is still so bad. Chapter 59. In the farm outside the city. Su Ku and other people who were bought were placed in 3 long rooms. Everyone could get a new thin quilt. It was still a chilly spring. The night was cold and the wind was strong. If they didn't cover themselves with quilts, they would definitely be cold. The two old women who did rough work were arranged in a separate room. The older ones were already numb. They quietly hugged their blankets and lay down on their beds, stiffly like corpses. Su Ku, who was young and vigorous, couldn't easily accept his fate. He grabbed the thin quilt with both hands, and his eyes were inexplicably gloomy. The teenager in the bed next to him turned around and found that Su Ku was still sitting on the bed. He couldn't help but sigh softly. "Brother Su, why aren't you sleeping now? Tomorrow, I don't know what the master wants us to do. Why don't you sleep early?" Before he finished speaking, Su Ku interrupted him with a hoarse voice and said, "You sleep first. I was very sick a while ago, so I slept a lot. Now I don't feel sleepy. If I disturb your rest, I will go out to enjoy the wind for a while. You sleep first." After that, Su Ku lifted the thin quilt, tightened his thin lips, and opened the door quietly. He saw the dark sky outside. There was no other sound except for the faint snoring coming from the door and the wind outside. Su Ku saw that and couldn't help licking his molars with the tip of his tongue. A plan that had been put on hold came to his mind again. If he didn't leave now, when the people in the room behind him were tamed by the Lus, there would be no chance for him to escape. Since he was lucky to be taken out of the death row, Su Ku had been thinking about regaining his freedom all the time. However, he became a slave and fell into the hands of the broker house. He could only choose to endure and stay dormant. It was not easy for him to figure out the law of the patrol guards in the broker house. He even made other preparations to escape tonight, but he didn't expect to run into Jianghu. However, it seemed that there was nothing wrong with it. The broker house was very strict with the goods. Basically, they patrolled twice in a quarter of an hour. There were strong thugs both inside and outside. Although he knew some martial arts, he was a weak scholar after all. Not to mention that he was sick now. If he was accidentally discovered and caught, he would definitely be beaten to death. On the other hand, the security of this farm was lax. Basically, no one cared about the slaves they bought. If he sneaked out of the farm at night, he would be safe as long as he entered the nearby woods. Then, he could escape to the mountains to hide for 2 days. Maybe he would be free. This thought lingered in his mind. Su Ku swallowed nervously. Because of the fever, his throat was so dry that smoke could come out. He shook his dizzy head, trying to keep himself awake. In his mind, he recalled the route he saw when he was pulled by the mule cart. "If the heavens don't kill me, I will definitely take revenge." Su Ku was very cautious. He crept out of the farm while hiding in the shadows. The farm behind him was like a sleeping, man-eating beast. It curled up and slept. It looked harmless, but it had the ability to suck people's souls and cut off their freedom. His footsteps staggered as he groped his way into the small forest. Another mile ahead was the deep forest and tall mountains. It would take at least 4 hours for the people of the farm to find out that he had escaped. He still had plenty of time. However, Su Ku's heart that was about to return to freedom didn't last long. His 2 handsome eyebrows gradually furrowed because of doubts. There was a kind of uneasiness in his heart. Su Ku walked for another quarter of an hour, and his heart gradually sank to the bottom. The night wind whistled and hit his face. It was bone-chilling, but it was still not as cold as his heart at this time. The huge gap between the heaven of freedom and the hell of reality when he was about to touch it made his hands and feet feel cold. A group of 12 people, all tall and strong, all dressed in neat leather armor, riding tall horses, were looking at him silently. Su Ku stared at them blankly, and they also stared at him blankly. At this time, silence was better than words. Finally, the crisp sound of horse hooves broke the silence. Someone came up and asked him, "Su Xiaoyu?" At first, Su Ku thought that he was lucky. Although he was an escaped slave, not everyone wanted to kill an escaped slave. Now, was it too late for him to go back to take a bath and sleep? These people were obviously coming for him, so Su Ku did not hold any hope of getting lucky. Instead, he felt a sense of pride that came from nowhere. He raised his hand to straighten his clothes, cupped his hands and said, "Yes, I am Su Xiaoyu from Zisong County. Su Xiaoyu? Oh, it's you. My master wants to see you. He has been waiting for you for most of the night. Su Ke was suspicious, but the man obviously didn't want to say more. He just asked Su Ke to follow him, as if he wanted to take him to see someone. Even if he wanted to escape, he had to think about it. He was a man with 2 legs. Even if he was sick, he couldn't outrun a 4-legged horse. There were many farms and villages of different sizes outside Hejin County. Not long after following this group of strange people, he saw a little candlelight in front of him from a distance. He could vaguely see the shape of a village. Su Ke frowned and pursed his thin lips tightly. His eyes were gloomy. The leader got off the horse and threw the reins to his companion. He said to Su Ke, whose face was pale and lips were blue, "Master is waiting for you in the house. Go in. Don't forget to be polite." Su Ke was still confused. He pushed the door open, and the hot air in the house blew into his face. There was also a little fragrance in the air. The fragrance made Su Ke subconsciously think of the handsome young man in the daytime, the son of a rich family who bought him. Is it him? Su Ke was hesitant, but he immediately denied the speculation when he saw the figure on the screen. The figure was obviously an adult man, and the young man in the daytime was at most 12 or 13 years old. "Come in." The man's slightly hoarse and mature voice came from the house, which shocked Su Ke out of his thoughts. Kneeling in front of the screen, Su Ke's eyes flashed with unknown colors. After a few breaths, he heard the rustling of clothes on the other side of the screen, and then he heard the sound of steady footsteps. The source of the fragrance was getting closer and closer to him. Su Ke. Su Xiaoyu. A familiar force came from his chin, but it was different from Jiang Pengji's folding fan. The man directly pinched it with his hand, and the force was so strong that he could not help but secretly gasp. It was so painful that even the corners of his eyes were filled with physiological tears, and his eyes were full of red veins. At that moment, Su Ke saw the face of the man in front of him clearly. Against the burning candlelight in the room, the man's face fell into his eyes. The man's eyes seemed to be dipped in poison and cold. From the outline of the face, it was somewhat similar to the young man in the daytime. As long as one was not blind, anyone could see that the two were related by blood. This. Su Ke was puzzled. He was just a slave bought by the young man. Why did the young man's family come out? He answered with some difficulty, "Yes. I am," for no reason. Su Ke's brain seemed to be empty when he was stared at by those venomous eyes. His heart was filled with an indescribable fear, and he didn't even feel the pain of his chin being pinched to the point where it was bruised. Chapter 60. After a good night's sleep, Takshu and Xuanmei helped Jiang Pengji dress and wash up. Second Lang Jun, the old housekeeper, sent a message last night saying that a servant escaped from the farm and was later caught. Takshu straightened her collar and then tied up her long hair. She fixed it with a simple but exquisite jade hairpin. Clothes and appearances in ancient times were complicated and particular. Jiang Pengji only knew how to tie her hair into a ponytail. She allowed the 2 personal maids to do whatever they wanted. She raised her half-closed eyelids and asked, "Escaped slave?" "Su Ke. That seems to be the name. Now he is waiting for you outside the yard." Xuanmei echoed. She then criticized, "Second Lang Jun is gentle to his servants, unlike the other young masters. Lang Jun, you took him in. What else could he be unhappy about? How dare he want to be a runaway slave?" Jiang Pengji listened quietly and didn't say a word. In fact, she admired Su Ke's actions. People who fought for their own freedom were courageous. However, in this era, her thoughts and Su Ke's actions were very rebellious. Su Ke was not worthy of being treated like a fool, so she just listened. Jiang Pengji switched on the live stream as usual. She resumed her elegant appearance and ate her breakfast quietly. Of course, due to the lack of resources in this era, her breakfast was average in the eyes of the audience. Outside the study, she saw Su Ku, who had changed into a clean set of clothes. Even the wound on his face had been properly bandaged. Jiang Pengji walked to Su Ku's side. "Why are you here?" "Master has ordered me to learn from you in the future and serve you." Su Ku's body trembled. He sounded unwilling, but his attitude was still respectful. It was completely different from the day before. Jiang Pengji raised her eyebrows and rolled her eyes. Suddenly, she thought of something and her lips curled into a smile. Because of her identity, Lu Lanting did not have a page boy. Takshu and Xuanmei were the ones who helped her with the chores. Now that Su Ku was half a page boy, he had to take care of the chores. Entering the study, rows upon rows of bookshelves were piled with countless bamboo slips, as well as incomparably precious paper books. Su Ku glanced at the labels on each row of bookshelves and the titles indicated. He was so stunned that he forgot where he was. Just this study room alone was several times larger than an ordinary household. The books on the shelves were even more priceless. If one were to say that he was dissatisfied before, after reading these books, he was no longer angry. In fact, he was so excited that his hands were trembling. What happened? Jiang Pengji glanced at Su Ku and sat down. She pointed at the box beside the desk and said, "Cut the paper." The bamboo paper produced by the papermaking workshop was very big. Jiang Pengji cut it into a suitable size according to the requirements. The paper she had cut before was used to practice calligraphy and complete homework. It was the size of A4, but it was too small for drawing designs, so she had to cut it again. Tout de fait, early in the morning, I've been given candy by the streamer. Although the gender is reversed, it's still pleasing to the eye. Laogong bougie hubby, isn't this the stubborn young man from yesterday? Jiang Pengji seemed to be practicing calligraphy, but in fact, she was watching the bullet screen of the live stream. The screen was full of old drivers. Biyao Zhangzi, did something unspeakable happen last night? Why does it feel like the wolf cub has become a little lamb after one night? What did you do to the cub last night? Jiang Pengji secretly clicked her tongue. What did she do to the cub? It was obvious that someone had gone to train the wolf. Sorcerer girl Afeng, I haven't been here for 2 days, and the streamer has already started to build a harem? Misha warrior Iun, the audience is confused, but Su Ku is obedient, and his style is as beautiful as a painting. The comments were getting more and more twisted. Some people even tipped her, hoping that she could make a live version of how to flirt with a man. Her eyebrows were jumping happily. Su Ku, who was beside her, had no idea of Jiang Pengji's rich inner thoughts. His pale hands were placed on the bamboo paper, and the smooth feeling under his palms made his cheeks flush. It was as if he was touching the soft skin of a young girl. The frequency of his heartbeat made him feel helpless. Was this bamboo paper? When Su Ku was studying with the headmaster in Zisong County, he had seen the face of it. It was a stunning sight that made his heart beat erratically. As a commoner, Su Ku was lucky enough to study. How could he have the chance to use bamboo paper, which was as expensive as gold? Not to mention, the quality of the bamboo paper he had seen before could not be compared to the box of bamboo paper in front of him. If the former was said to be as loose as a middle-aged woman's skin, the latter was as white and smooth as a newborn baby's. It was addictive to touch. Jiang Pengji, did she make a mistake? Why did she feel like she had brought back an idiot with a fetish? Actually, she didn't intend to let Su Ku stay by her side. She just wanted to buy him and promote him to be in charge of the accounts. He would be mainly in charge of the group of servants she trained, from trivial matters to the training process and rewards and punishments. She had to take care of everything. They were the embryonic form of her second novel, and they were also her guinea pigs. It was inevitable that she would pay attention to them. Even though she had been the commander of the 7th Army, this era was too different from hers. There were many things that she had to explore. The light in Su Ku's eyes was exactly what she admired. But, it seemed that her father, who was obsessed with women, had misunderstood. Because of the crazy work in the past few years, Lu Shi's life was quite irregular. That day, he slept until noon. Jiang Pengji went to greet him and had lunch with him. She observed carefully and found that Lu Shi's eyes were darker. She knew it clearly, but she still opened her mouth to ask, "Father, did you sleep well last night?" Lu Shi smiled and took a sip of tea to moisten his lips. "I went to train the wolves." Jiang Pengji, white lotuses were all the same, but there were always two sides to a two-faced person. That was true. Jiang Pengji silently turned her face away. Jiang Pengji thought without sympathy, Su Ku would probably be traumatized for the rest of his life. Then she thought of something else and felt that she had to explain it to Lu Shi. She thought that Lu Shi might have misunderstood and thought that she was attracted to Su Ku's beauty. "Father, Su Ku is a man after all. It's not appropriate for him to stay by my side." Jiang Pengji was a girl now. Su Ku and Feng Jin were not blind. If they were not careful, they would be exposed. Lu Shi said, "After all, I bought him with real money. I'll keep him as a page boy for now. If he doesn't work, then I'll send him away." Jiang Pengji narrowed her eyes. Was there a hidden meaning in Lu Shi's words? "I want him to be in charge of the training of the servants. He can also be an accountant." Lu Shi looked up at her and frowned slightly. Then he said indifferently, "It's up to you." Chapter 61. To provide you with wonderful novels to read. Life in ancient times was actually quite boring. If Lu Shi hadn't given Jiang Pengji such a test, she would have been bored to death. In such a state of idleness, she began to particularly miss the days when she had to put her head on a belt. The system despised her. "I thought the host would regain the skills from your previous life and become a Vajra Barbie or something," Jiang Pengji said matter-of-factly. "This body is too weak to withstand that level of training, and it will make people around me suspicious. I have a thorough plan, and I need a reasonable time." Now is not the time. How could she forget the incident with the bandits in Hejin County? She didn't want to try the feeling of powerlessness a second time. But she also knew that the genes of this body were not good enough, and the overall quality was also not good enough. Under such circumstances, no matter how much she trained, it would only slightly increase her strength. The effort and the gain were completely disproportionate. She would only do that if she was out of her mind. There was obviously a safer way, so of course she wouldn't choose the one that was far away. Moreover, even now, there are not many people who can defeat me, right? Most people who saw her would think that she was a thin young man. With her age and figure, how much damage could she do? In fact, her strength was higher than that of a strong adult man. Coupled with her rich combat experience, she was simply a human-shaped killing machine. Her current life was stable, and her strength was enough to protect herself. As for the rest, she already had a plan in her mind. The system snorted. "It's so boring to follow a host like you, it feels like there's no use at all." It was a system that broadcast palace intrigue. All kinds of beauties fighting and scheming against each other were the mainstream. How could it be like Jiang Pengji? "You're useless, trash system." Jiang Pengji mercilessly attacked it, but there was always a smile at the corner of her mouth. The system coldly dragged out its voice and fiercely typed 4 words. "Blue skinny mushroom cack." Jiang Pengji, in the eyes of an outsider, Jiang Pengji was sitting in the corridor, leaning against the table. She supported her chin with one hand and held a scroll with the other. She always had a gentle smile at the corner of her mouth, and her eyes were charming. The spring breeze blew her hair, and the pear blossoms in the courtyard swayed with it. Seeing this, Su Ku, who was guarding at the side, secretly turned his head, feeling a little surprised. If this Lang Jun was less heroic, he would be as pretty as a girl. Of course, it was just a likeness. Anyway, Su Ku couldn't imagine a girl with such a black heart and such a vile character. It was simply a nightmare. Even though he was unhappy, Su Ku didn't dare to show it. In his eyes, Jiang Pengji wasn't scary. What was scary was his father, who was above her. Even though it had been 2 or 3 days, he still felt a chill in his body every night. Once he fell asleep, the room would be pitch black, and he would think of that pair of eyes that seemed to be dipped in poison, scaring him so much that he wanted to have nightmares. Of course, the truth would prove how silly he was. At most, She would torture people, but she would make them wish they were dead. What happened, Takshu? Jiang Pengji turned her head and looked at the corner of the corridor. Su Ku, who was closest to her, did not react at all. The maidservant, Takshu, respectfully handed over an invitation card. She took it, and a delicate fragrance came from the letter. It smelled very good. An assembly? The ways. There were 2 cards in total. One was written, and the other was tucked inside. The handwriting was gentle and graceful, and it was very pleasing to the eye. It was Wei Jingxian's handwriting. I'm not interested in that. She was proficient in fighting and surviving in the wild, but she had no idea how to recite poetry. As a science monk who loved machinery, she was considered illiterate. Her motto was, if you're not convinced, come fight me. That was how hooligan she was. Even the former Lu Lanting was bad at poetry. She was often praised by the previous teachers as the work of a craftsman. Takshu was stunned. She didn't expect Jiang Pengji to reject her. She stood rooted to the ground. Xuanmei added awkwardly, but it's a personal invitation from Wei Nyangzi. If I reject it, I'm afraid. Wei Jingxian was his fiancée in name. What was the difference between rejecting a personal invitation and a slap in the face? Jiang Pengji read Xuanmei's unfinished words and helplessly looked up at the sky in the courtyard. The sky was clear, and it was the perfect weather to go out. Su Ke frowned and asked in a low voice, this is a gathering, not a feud. How can it be the world's invitation? Usually, invitations were sent a few days in advance to give the invitees enough time to prepare. This invitation was sent in the afternoon. Jiang Pengji said carelessly, you're a young lady. Men can't understand your temper. You have to tolerate it. After that incident, she had offended more than half of the noble ladies in Hejin County. It was normal for her to be bullied. Su Ke was speechless. She made it sound like he had no bearing. Jiang Pengji played with the sandalwood fan in her hand. She ordered the maids to prepare suitable clothes. She was ready to leave for the gathering. This weather is actually more suitable for sleeping, Jiang Pengji said to the audience. Jiang Pengji said to the audience, sleepy in spring, sleepy in autumn, sleepy in summer, and sleepless in winter and March. It's a good time to sleep all year round. I'd be crazy to waste it on a boring poetry meeting. Jiang Pengji always had a lazy look on her face. She leaned against the table and looked like a sleeping beauty. The gathering was held by the Weis at the Ishui River outside the city. It would take about an hour for the carriage to get there. Apart from the driver, Jiang Pengji only brought a maid and Su Ke, who was not very good at fighting. Jiang Pengji brought Su Ke with her for a reason. His father, Lu Shi, seemed to care a lot about Su Ke. He even tested him on his studies. His attitude was more like a student than a servant. According to the rules of that era, it was a bit whimsical. Su Ke not only had a criminal record, but he was also a slave who had been branded. His social status was lower than that of a commoner. No matter how talented he was, he would not be valued by someone like Lu Shi. But, thinking about Lu Shi's unconventional and open style, she was not sure what he was thinking. Putting Lu Shi aside, she had been observing Su Ke for the past few days. Indeed, she was tempted. Of course, it had nothing to do with romantic feelings. She simply felt that if he was trained well, he might be a good assistant. Su Ke was a standard talent for internal affairs. He was quick-witted and resourceful. If it was in her world, he might be recruited as an assistant in the army and help her deal with all kinds of messy documents. But now? His temperament was a bit uncertain. He needed to be trained. She would keep him for now. If it was possible, she would use him. As she thought about it, they arrived at the gathering. From afar, they could see a circle of servants and carriages. Once bitten, twice shy. It seems that he was frightened by what happened before. Seeing the formation, Jiang Pengji got out of the carriage. Her wooden clogs clattered on the stones. Chapter 62. The third month of late spring was the season when the grass was long and the orioles were in flight. The willows were green and the flowers were in full bloom. The sky was as blue as if it had been washed. Silhouettes flashed by the pavilion. Young maidservants quickly carried fresh seasonal fruits. Pear blossoms were in full bloom nearby. The scenery was beautiful, but the people were even more beautiful. More than 10 young Langjuns were sitting at the table with exquisite snacks and fruits on the table in front of them. The oldest was in his 20s, while the youngest was only a little over 10 years old. Their ages varied, but they were all extremely good-looking. Jiang Pengji looked at the screams and screams on the bullet screen. She secretly rolled her eyes. She didn't understand the aesthetics of those people. Although these Langjuns were beautiful, they were all dressed in brightly colored clothes with flowers on their hairpins and powder on their faces. They were really more beautiful than flowers. Cough, cough, cough. To put it bluntly, it was a gathering of a bunch of traps. Faced with Jiang Pengji's ridicule, the audience on the bullet screen was not happy. A series of blocked her vision. Everyone had their own aesthetic standards. Jiang Pengji was speechless. Receive? All right, she surrendered. Other than these decent Langjuns, there were a few noble ladies sitting on the other side of a translucent landscape screen. At a glance, more than half of them were acquaintances. Not long ago, they had just experienced an exciting adventure, and now they were in the mood to participate in the scholarly gathering. These young ladies were really bold. When Jiang Pengji saw them, the noble ladies naturally saw her too. Among them, Sheng Wanwan's eyes lit up. She wanted to step forward, but they were in a public place. Everyone thought that Jiang Pengji was a man and Wei Jingxian's fiancé. If she was too attentive, she might be misunderstood as having feelings for Sister Lanting. As he thought of this, he froze in his action of getting up. Annoyed, he sat back down, feeling listless. Jiang Pengji did not sit with the noble ladies. Instead, she found a seat among the Langjuns. Su Ku and Takshu, the maid, sat on either side of her. She was a little late. The assembly had already begun a quarter of an hour ago. Everyone was very dissatisfied with her behavior of not even apologizing. However, they did not say it out loud and only silently expressed their disregard. Jiang Pengji did not care at all. She picked a fruit that was soaked in the well water and threw it into her mouth. A refreshing coolness spread throughout her body. Going against a few embroidered flowers and plants while reciting poems? That would be a waste of time. He might as well eat, drink, and take a nap when he was tired. She was relaxed, but the audience was anxious. They were still waiting for Jiang Pengji to amaze the world with a brilliant feat and slap their faces. You're just going to change places to eat, drink, and then take an afternoon nap when you're participating in the poetry meet? Host, you're such a disgrace to the transmigrated woman. Host V, when I was in school, my grades in liberal arts were pretty low. Please don't make things difficult for me. Even the archaeologists of my era might not be able to understand the ancient sayings of ancient times. Other than training, I usually fight. I'm a martial artist. The audience was dumbfounded. This was different from the script. Lan Shui Yubuja, it's okay, host. We'll be your support. Baidu and Daddy Gu will help you. Sorceress Ah Feng, left hand is the Tang dynasty's third wave, right hand is the Song dynasty's Yuan Chu. Above you, you have Li Bai's support. Below you, you have Du Gong's support. Host, you're a great person standing on the shoulders of the giants of poetry and literature. Even if they're dwarves, you can beat them in seconds. You were just licking the screen half a minute ago, and now you're turning against me after licking the screen? Jiang Pengji was speechless as she read the comments. Turning against them was as easy as flipping a book. Misha Warrior Ah Yuan, my mouse is already on the Baidu search interface. I'll search for all the poems you want. Jiang Pengji began to reflect upon herself as she looked at the audience who were not afraid of making things worse. Had she been too quiet these past few days? How could she make the audience forget about her previous brutality? Host V, as the saying goes, there's no first in literature and no second in martial arts. One poem can't win them over. If you cheat, you'll be exposed in minutes. Even if you make an amazing poem, they won't let it go. What should I do next? Moreover, the mainstream of this era was not about quatrains or songs. It was useless to copy them mechanically. Perhaps in other eras, being exposed for plagiarism or impersonation was not a big deal, but in this era where literature prevailed, it was tantamount to seeking death. It would also implicate the whole clan. Even if one was from a noble family, once such a thing happened, one's entire life would be ruined. Since it was so clear, the audience who had been following the stream for the past few days became much more clear-headed and stopped making a fuss. Sigh, it was so boring without a poem segment. They'd better continue licking the screen in silence. Jiang Pengji did not have the time to celebrate the rare moment of peace. She heard someone call her name and subconsciously turned her head to look. What's the matter? The other party choked. Anyone who was not blind could see how absent-minded Jiang Pengji was just now. Due to the chaos of the 16 kingdoms and the unification of the Xia kingdom, women were not restricted to the boudoir. Even now, the 5 kingdoms were divided into Xia, and the social atmosphere was biased towards men's rights. Women were slowly restrained by various rules, but for now, it was not too strict. A gathering like this was basically equivalent to a blind date for young men and women of the right age. These Langjuns, even if they were not interested in the noble lady next door, still wanted to show their best side, like a peacock spreading its tail. Just when they were trying their best to show off their talents, a traitor appeared in the middle of the crowd. She looked like she was not interested. Wasn't she looking for trouble? When the Lungjuan's face was about to turn red, the audience who were watching the gathering reminded Jiang Pengji on the bullet screen. She then looked slow and said, "I'm not good at poetry. I'm afraid I'm going to spoil everyone's mood." She rejected me so directly. The atmosphere was slightly awkward. At that moment, a clear voice came from the side, like pearls falling on a jade plate. There was a hint of a smile in the voice. "Lanting is really mischievous. If it wasn't for the gathering, it would be extremely difficult to see you." Feng Jin walked out from under the pear tree. His skin was like snow, his face was like jade, and his eyes were like dots of paint. His phoenix eyes were long and narrow, and the ends of his eyes were slightly raised. He was not old, but his charm was already beginning to form. Compared to Feng Jin's charm, which attracted the attention of the people when he appeared, Jiang Pengji's performance was too uncooperative. "Why are you still in Hejin County?" Everyone was speechless. She just came to the gathering, and you want to kick her out of Hejin County with just one sentence? Feng Jin did not show any anger towards Jiang Pengji's disdain. Instead, he asked the servant to place a seat next to her. He joked, "Lanting's heartless words are really hurtful." Jiang Pengji snorted. "Before saying those words, first clean up the perfume on your body. Let me give you a word of advice. You're young and refined." Feng Jin was stunned for a moment. He understood the meaning behind her words. His pale cheeks suddenly turned red, and he almost lost his composure. Chapter 63. Young and refined? Lan Shuiyu Buja, hey, young man, young and refined. Masturbation is bad for your health. Biyao Zhangzi, what do you mean by young and refined? I don't understand anything. Tudu Feiqiu, hey, I'm so embarrassed that I'm turning yellow. Feng Jin blushed and said in a low voice, "Lanting, don't slander me. When did I ever do such a thing?" Jiang Pengji looked down on him even more. "If you don't do such a thing, do you want to see a famous doctor?" Feng Jin was speechless. Was this the legendary yellow mud that fell into one's pants? Even if it wasn't shit, it was still shit. Who said one had to look for girls in a brothel? Couldn't he just listen to the music and watch the beauties dance? It seemed like nothing good ever happened when he saw Jianghu. Feng Jin took a sip of tea to calm himself down. At that moment, he noticed Su Ku, who was sitting behind Jianghu, and asked, "This is?" Jianghu said, "My new page boy. He's arrogant, but he has some skills. Maybe he'll be of great use in the future." Feng Jin was surprised. "I can't believe I heard such high praise from Lanting. He must be extraordinary." He had seen Jianghu's mouth, but he didn't know how her eyes worked. It seemed that no one could hide from her. Su Ku was valued by her, which meant that he wasn't weak. That made the young and energetic boy want to compete with him. Love goes small talk net ku for a moment. Feng Jin had forgotten something important. Lu Lanting was a girl. Jianghu glanced at him and said as she ate her tea, "No matter how extraordinary he is, he's still my accountant." To be honest, the tea in this era was very different from the tea she had imagined. There were many spices added to it, and the taste was hard to describe. Strangely enough, the more she drank, the more she got used to the taste. It was terrifying. "Lanting, you don't play with words?" Feng Jin smiled and nodded at the Langjuns. He whispered to her. Jianghu raised her eyebrows. "It has never been my style to attack the enemy's strong points with my weak points." Feng Jin thought about what she was good at and silently face-bombed. She shouldn't have come to a place like this, okay? There are also activities like horse riding and archery at the assembly. You can show your skills there. Feng Jin comforted her. Even he, who was in Shangyang, had heard of Lu Shi, the gifted scholar of Hejin County. Lu Lanting, as his son, was illiterate and had no knowledge of poetry. This was completely unexpected. However, everyone had their own strengths and weaknesses. Just because the father was brilliant did not mean that the child had to be a master of the literary world. Oh. Jianghu glanced at the Langjuns, who looked like peacocks spreading their feathers, and laughed disdainfully. "I heard that in spring, the male animals like to show off their strong bodies and extraordinary abilities to the females. With their abilities, they can play the guqin, sing, and recite some poems that make them feel sour, but it's too much for them to ride a horse, shoot an arrow, or throw a pot, and so on." Love go little say net ku. Feng Jin was speechless. He should not have talked about this topic. If they continued, he was afraid that he would not be able to leave the assembly alive. He would be beaten to death. Feng Jin cleverly changed the topic to prevent Jianghu from saying something more provocative. "Why is Lanting here at the assembly today?" It was different from the usual poetry and literature gatherings. Today's assembly was more of a blind date. Jianghu raised her eyebrows at the landscape screen and said in a warm tone, "Jing is here too." If it had been someone else, they would have thought that Jianghu missed her fiancé and took the opportunity to come to the assembly to relieve the pain of longing. However, Feng Jin was not an ordinary person. He and Jianghu had not known each other for long, but the few times they had interacted, they were as familiar as old friends. Feng Jin frowned and asked in a voice that only the two of them could hear, "Does the Weiss want to break off the engagement?" "Huayu, have you forgotten?" Jianghu raised her eyebrows and her eyes were filled with ridicule. "This marriage is not going to last. Jing is at the age to discuss marriage and should get married after the wedding ceremony. There are not many Langjuns of the right age in Hejin County. Shouldn't we make plans early?" In ancient times, marriages were all set early. They waited until they were of a certain age to find someone they liked. When Feng Jin asked this, his expression changed. He seemed to have been tricked by himself. "You don't feel unhappy at all?" Jianghu responded by rolling her eyes in annoyance. Feng Jin was speechless. Oh, the person in front of him was a girl, but he could not help but think of her as a brother. "Since you already know the purpose of this gathering, Lanting should not have come. Even if she was only a fake husband on the surface, the Wei residents' actions were still giving her a green hat, okay? Jiang Pengji said, do you think I can ignore the sun outside just because I covered myself with the blanket and slept in? Moreover, I really like Jing. A good girl like her should have a good husband. I came to see what kind of a Langjun the Weiss are interested in and help Jing, judge him. No matter what the Weiss were like, Wei Jingxian was indeed innocent. Under the circumstances where there was no conflict, love for beautiful women was above everything else. Then what did you see? Feng Jin did not like to gossip behind people's backs, but he was saying it in front of them. Jiang Pengji was not Feng Jin. She had no qualms. While she was drinking tea, she looked at one person. A real idiot. The fragrant powder on him came from different maids. There are probably 3 of them. One of the maids is pregnant. She's around 5 months pregnant. Feng Jin could listen carefully at first, but after a while, he felt that his worldview was broken. This one is even worse. He is lusting after his brother's wife. I guess he had many romantic dreams last night. That one likes men and is cold to women. If she marries him, she will probably be a widow, Jiang Pengji gossiped with Feng Jin in a low voice. As for the one in pink with flowers on his hairpin, he is addicted to sex and has a tendency to abuse women. TSK, what a beautiful face, but he is filthy on the inside. Whoever marries him will be unlucky. As for the one in green, he is considered loyal, but sometimes he is a little muddle-headed. He is usually too cautious and can only be considered average. His widowed mother is strong. I am afraid that the bride will be tortured if she marries him. He is not a good choice. As he spoke, another youth dressed in a bluestone-colored robe walked in from outside. His grace was not inferior to Feng Jin, who was beside him. Feng Jin suddenly laughed. Lanting, look at that one. What does he look like? At first glance, he looks all right. Unfortunately, he is not a good man. Chapter 64. We provide you with wonderful novels to read. Feng Jin's eyes lit up. He continued to ask, apart from these, is there anything else? Jiang Pengji sneered. He came from the same brothel as you. How could you not know? He was hugging left and right, and one of them was feeding him snacks in his arms. What a carefree life. To put it bluntly, we fought for a few rounds. We had to wash up before we rushed over. Feng Jin's pale face turned red again. He felt even more awkward and uncomfortable than before. Why did he hate Lu Lanting so much? He knew Lu Lanting was ruthless, but he still wanted to be bullied. Jiang Pengji glanced at the Langjuns who were still chatting and talking about poetry. No matter how beautiful they were just a pile of weak bones in her eyes. They were so weak that it was disgusting. Jiang Pengji threw the teacup on the floor. Boring. Takshu, Su Ku, follow me. She stood up and walked past Wuma Jun. She did not see the awkward expression on his face. From afar, Wuma Jun had seen Feng Jin chatting happily with a handsome young Langjun. He wanted to come over and talk, but he did not expect Feng Jin to stand up and leave with a cold face. The change in attitude was so drastic that the suspicious Wuma Jun could not help but overthink. Feng Jin smiled and shook his head. He was helping Jiang Pengji out. Lanting is not good at poetry. Looks like he's annoyed. Wuma Jun sat down. The unhappiness in his heart dissipated a little, but he still minded. Who is that Langjun? He had left the others behind and went to the noble lady. They seemed to be chatting happily. Wuma Jun felt that such a person would not amount to much. Feng Jin smiled and introduced him as if he did not see the dissatisfaction in Wuma Jun's eyes. Lu Zhongqing, the second Langjun of Lu County chief's family. In all of Dongqing, Lu Shi from Hejin County was the only person called Lu Zhongqing who was also the county chief. Of course, the title, County Chief Lu, would have to be changed in the near future. Wuma Jun's expression was much more relaxed, and there was even a hint of enthusiasm. Although Lu Shi was not in the imperial court and his official position was not prominent, no one in the imperial court dared to ignore him. Not everyone had the ability to bring a barren county back to life and make it prosperous. That county's annual tax revenue was comparable to that of 2 states, and it was also a major grain-producing county in Dongqing. Wu Majun was still suspicious. So it's the Lang Jun of County Chief Lu. But why did he leave just now? Lanting loves martial arts and seems to be interested in chivalry. He is very impatient with poems and songs. How could he be interested? Feng Jin was still gentle and seemed a little helpless. She's only 12 years old now. She's young and impetuous. Let her be. Wu Majun knew Feng Jin well. Feng Jin liked to talk about things that were difficult to understand, and Lu Lanting was probably angered because of this. Thinking that he had found a reason, he finally revealed a gentle smile and said, Huayu, since Lu Langjun doesn't like to talk about those things, why don't you just change it? Why make him leave in anger? It is said that County Chief Lu loves his son as much as his own life, and he is the General Evaluation Officer this year. Aren't you afraid? There was an evaluation every 3 years. Although Lu Shi was only a county governor, his status was even comparable to that of a governor. He was specially promoted for this year's evaluation. If they offended Lu Shi at this time, they might get their heads blown off. Feng Jin said carelessly, County Chief Lu is an honest and upright person. Why would he care about the conflicts of a child's family? Which official in Dongqing's officialdom was not in cahoots with one another? Only Lu Shi, Lu Zhongqing, was a clear stream. Back then, when he was sent to Hu County, anyone with a discerning eye could tell that he had been ambushed and suffered a loss. Hu County was a large place, comparable to a prefecture. However, it was a place with barren mountains and unruly rivers. The people were tough, and there were bandits and squires. There were years of floods and natural and man-made disasters. Before Lu Shi, 9 county governors had died in such a place. They had thought that Lu Shi would be the 10th unlucky one. Who would have thought that he would have the ability to turn the world upside down? Even though Hu County was still a county, it was as prosperous as the other rich prefectures in Dongqing. The food it produced had alleviated the disasters in the 2 neighboring prefectures and stabilized Dongqing's decline. Who in the court dared to say that they did not know about Lu Shi? Jiang Pengji did not know that her strange father was so cunning. She had another problem on her mind. Could anyone come here and pull Shangguan Wan away from this sticky candy? She kept saying that Brother Lanting did not care about Wan, and she kept saying that Brother Lanting did not love Wan, She made it sound as if she had committed a heinous crime. Then what do you want? Jiang Pengji felt that she was stupid. Why did she come here? She might as well choke Feng Jin to death. Teach Wan how to ride a horse. I want a big horse, not a pony. Wan pouted as she begged. Her braids swayed back and forth. You're so hard to please. How are you going to ride a horse with that outfit? Jiang Pengji face-bombed, but she accepted Shangguan Wan's kindness. Despite her young age, she was a smart girl. At her age, it was still too early for her to come to this gathering, but she had come with Lu Lanting's best interests in mind. Shangguan Wan had probably seen through the Weiss plans and was trying to get back at her in front of everyone. I knew that Brother Lanting would say that. I'm prepared. She squinted her eyes slyly as she spoke. Fine, I'll give it to her. Jiang Pengji had no choice but to turn around and ask Wei Jingxian, whose face was filled with guilt and embarrassment. Do you want to go? Wei Jingxian's exquisitely made-up face turned pale. She shook her head. Shangguan Wan walked in front. She had changed her outfit for the day to make it suitable for riding a horse. Brother Lanting, don't blame Sister Jingxian. She only found out about today's incident last night. Pulling Lu Lanting's horse, the 2 of them walked to a place where the crowd could see but not hear. Why would I blame her? The Wei residence's invitation secretly contained her flower note, and there's a code in it. Come, let's give it a try. Jiang Pengji stood on her tiptoes and stroked the horse's neck. On the surface, she was trying to soothe the horse's anxiety at meeting a stranger, but in reality, she was using her aura to suppress it. It had dared to kick its hooves before, but now, it would not dare to throw a tantrum. Both Lu Lanting and Sheng Wanwan were little children, but the horse was a pure-blooded northern borderline stallion. Its height alone was several heads taller than the two of them. But now, the legendary wild horse was as obedient as a lamb. It's too high. I can't get up, Sheng Wanwan tried a few times, but she could not even step into the stirrup. Her face scrunched up. Jiang Pengji did not carry her up, so she gave the horse a look and used a mental hint. Then, Sheng Wanwan saw that Jiang Pengji patted the horse's body, and the horse obediently lowered its body. You're so smart. Jiang Pengji smiled as she held the reins. Sheng Wanwan nervously grabbed the saddle. You can get up now. Chapter 65. He lovingly stroked the neck of the white horse and imitated Jiang Pengji's previous actions to comfort the horse. Speaking of which, the horse was quite pitiful. It was a northern warhorse with pure white fur and no other colors. Lu Shi had spent a lot of effort to get it back. However, it followed a lousy master and became a horse to pull a carriage. It almost became a common horse. Sheng Wanwan sighed. But I think Sister Jingxian and Brother Lanting are really a good match. It was wrong to enter the path of decay at such a young age. The corner of Jiang Pengji's eye twitched. You're playing dumb again. Brother Lanting died young. Sister Lanting is in front of you. Sheng Wanwan teased, if I call you sister in front of others, would you dare to agree? At that moment, Jiang Pengji realized that the style of the bullet screen had changed again, and it was a meme she could not understand at all. Biyao President, Wild Monkey, do you dare to answer me if I call you? Lan Shui Yubuja, Wild Monkey, do you dare to answer me when I call you? Cafeteria Daffin Auntie, Stupid Monkey, do you dare to answer me when I call you? The screen was full of ruffians. Jiang Pengji was stunned. How bored were the audience? Other than duplication, what else can you do? She crossed her arms in front of her chest and lifted her eyelids, looking like a scoundrel. I really don't dare to agree. With the help of the horse's height, Sheng Wanwan saw that the elegant gathering seemed to have changed its activity. Are they going to play archery and pitch-pot? They're just a bunch of useless chickens. What's there to look at? Jiang Pengji rolled her eyes and did not hide her disdain. Sheng Wanwan nodded seriously. That's true. Brother Lanting is the most heroic and extraordinary. Wanner still wants to walk 2 laps. Seeing that she was going to lead the horse back, Sheng Wanwan somewhat shamelessly hugged the horse's neck, looking like she was unwilling to get down. You've become a demon. Jiang Pengji muttered. She had just had this thought. Although the restrictions on women were not too strict now, and they could go shopping or participate in poetry gatherings if they were accompanied, some things could not be done as they pleased. Sheng Wanwan was young, so there were more restrictions. Even if she wanted to ride a horse, she could only ride a pony. Now that he was riding on the back of such a tall horse, he only felt that the surrounding air was fresh. Humming a nursery rhyme, the light and cheerful tune made people feel relaxed and happy. Jiang Pengji, on the other hand, had no idea that her appointed accountant had caused some trouble for her. He had embarrassed a few noble sons. Lang Jun, please take a look. Su Ku put down his brush. There was a piece of paper on the table. The handwriting on it was thin and powerful, but it was hard to hide its sharpness. Although he was an idiot, he still had some self-restraint. He couldn't do something as uncultured as insulting him. Feng Jin, who was watching the series of events, looked at Su Ku, who had a humble face but a strong aura. He then looked at the figure who was strolling with a big horse in the distance, who was as small as an ant. He silently took a sip of tea. It was better for him to silently be an audience drinking tea. How did things develop to such a state of mutual hostility? It all started when Shengguan pestered Jiang Pengji to walk the horse. It was not convenient for Su Ku and Takshu to follow her, so they stayed at the assembly. It seemed that some of the guests had been informed of the true purpose of the assembly by their family elders, and they were waiting to watch a good show. He thought that he would see the other party fuming with anger and embarrassment, but he didn't expect that she wouldn't care about others at all. When they asked her to play poetry, she shamelessly admitted that she was not good at it. When they asked her for other activities, she just looked at them with a dispirited and bored expression. They did not want to continue pestering her, and naturally, they could not watch the good show that they had been waiting for. With such an impenetrable face, they really couldn't do anything to the other party. Then, when they looked away, she brought the daughter of the Shengguan family to walk the horse. The monk could run, but the temple could not to mention that her manservant and servant girl were still there. Lang Jun, who had been unintentionally choked by Jiang Pengji, mocked her in a low voice. His words were vague, but those who knew understood. Su Ku was not one of them, but he was smart. When he heard those words, he felt that it was not right. Then, someone mocked Jiang Pengji for not knowing literature and had failed to live up to Lu Shi's reputation. How could a noble family produce an illiterate? It would have been fine if that was all, but they felt that it was not enough, so they took it out on Su Ku. They could not humiliate the master, but it was the same to humiliate the servant. Takshu was a servant girl. Although Jiang Pengji had called them idiots, they had always been good at pretending, so Takshu would not be implicated. So, they were slapped in the face. That was how it happened. They challenged Su Ku to discuss poetry, but each time they competed, they were slapped in the face, and it hurt more than the last. Feng Jin could not bear to look at it, so he turned his face away. He did not dare to look at the tragic scene. Su Ku was not born in a good family. It was difficult for an ordinary family to study. The cheapest book in the bookstore was half a year for an ordinary family. Studying was expensive, and it was not easy for Su Ku to win if he did not use tricks. On the other hand, poetry was valuable because of its spirituality, which Su Ku did not lack. If it was an examination on strategy or holy words, he would probably be in trouble. But the reality was that a group of mediocre idiots wanted to show off, but they happened to run into Su Ku's strong point and were forced to be taught a lesson. Feng Jin smiled. As expected, it is not wise to attack the enemy's strong point with one's weak point. Su Ku glanced at him discreetly. He maintained a calm expression on his face, but in his heart, he felt a little guilty. On the other side, Wuma Jun smiled and tried to smooth things over, but his bias was very obvious. Lang Jun, why bother with a lowly servant? It was just a coincidence. Su Ku's eyes darkened, and he quietly clenched his fists. But he could not continue to be competitive in this situation. Otherwise, he would be humiliated and beaten to death, and no one would say anything. So what if he was talented? His identity could crush people to death. Seeing that Su Ku was about to lose, Feng Jin smiled and suggested, governing a country and family is not something that can be solved with 1 or 2 poems. Lang Jun, why do you care so much? It's okay to lose by 1.5 feet. It's just to kill time. Now that spring is just right, talking about poems is too boring. What do you guys think about horse racing and throwing pots? The fish are fat, and fishing by the river is also fun. Feng Jin gently said to Su Ku, go down and ask Lanting if he is interested in playing. Wuma Jun turned his head and looked at Feng Jin with an inexplicable expression. Wait. Just when Feng Jin was about to relax, he heard his Lang Jun, who was dressed in pink, suggest with a smile, this Lang Jun is right. It's just that. I guess you guys have played with ordinary throwing pots and shooting arrows too many times and are tired of it. Why don't we try something new? I heard that the people of the northern borderline are tough. They often make the slaves have something on their heads and use it as a target. Hearing this, Feng Jin suddenly clenched his fists in his sleeves and warned, oh? It's just to kill time. Why don't we let him try? Chapter 66. Wu Majun did not want to offend either side, so he chose to be neutral. Feng Jin was furious. The Lang Jun took a strange fruit from the table. It was slightly bigger than an adult's fist. Su Ke's eyes widened. He held the fruit in his hands, not expecting things to turn out this way. Feng Jin put down his gentle facade and said coldly, "There are women here. If I miss, won't I be disturbing them?" The Lang Jun was aggressive. Etiquette, music, archery, strategy, mathematics, and calligraphy are the 6 skills of a gentleman. They are the foundation of a gentleman's life. They are the key to righteousness, cultivation, family, governance, and peace. All of us here have been learning since young. How could we not be able to control such a small arrow? After that, he smiled again. He was young, but the corners of his mouth were curled up in a sinister smile. Thinking of Jiang Pengji's judgment of the man in pink, Feng Jin could not help but admire her ability to judge people. He secretly took a deep breath and maintained a calm expression on his face. "Lang Jun, have you forgotten that this is Lanting's page boy, a servant of the Lu residence? How can you deal with her people without authorization? This is not what a gentleman should do. Please reconsider." Lu Lanting had slaughtered a bunch of bandits. How could he be a good person? Rather than saying that he was protecting Su Ke, it was more accurate to say that he was preventing a farce from happening. Moreover, he could not understand why someone would want to cause trouble for Lu Lanting at this juncture. Did they not know that Lu Lanting's father was the general evaluation officer and could decide the future of many young scholars with one word? The Lang Jun snorted. "If anything happens to this lowly servant, I'll just compensate Lu Lanting 10 times. Bring me the bow and arrows." Lu Lanting comes from a scholarly family. His upbringing is strict. He won't ask for justice for a lowly servant. Su Ke's face was originally filled with anger, but now he was so angry that his hands were trembling. These people did not know about the people's livelihood and only knew how to enjoy themselves. They had no regard for human life. They were young, but they were ruthless. The Lang Jun heard the Lang Jun's proud voice. "The limit is 50 steps. Tell him to stand still. Remember not to tremble. Otherwise, he'll miss." There were a lot of servants guarding the assembly, and a layer of white cloth was wrapped around the assembly to block the wind and the prying eyes of others. Wei Jingxian heard the commotion next door. Puzzled, she called a maid over to ask what was going on. Wan Xiao sat to the side and frowned. "It's a gathering today. Why is this happening instead of talking about poetry?" The noblewoman who did not know the truth chuckled. "I heard that Zheng Langjun has been interested in Jingxian for a long time." If Wei Jingxian had been teased like this before, she would have glared at her angrily. But now, for some reason, she was a little absent-minded. Wan Xiao nudged her a few times before she came back to her senses. She looked absent-minded. Wan Xiao's dissatisfaction. Even if he is jealous, he should not humiliate him like this. It was one thing to lose to Zheng Langjun in poetry, but now he was humiliated and attacked him. His behavior was unsightly. After thinking for a while, she summoned her maidservant and whispered a few words to her, telling Lu Lanting to clean up the mess herself. Wei Jingxian looked at Wan Xiao with gratitude, which made Wan Xiao feel strange. Wan Xiao could not help but frown at the strange atmosphere in the gathering. Elsewhere, Jiang Pengji was still holding the reins and walking the horse. A group of spectators inexplicably started to address her as eldest senior brother and Shengguan Wan as the lowly version of her master. She had no idea what she had done to provoke these people. She felt like a group of lunatics getting high on themselves. The generation gap was indeed insurmountable. Huh? What is it now? Jiang Pengji looked up. Does this little girl still want to walk the horse? Her wooden clogs were about to be worn out by the pebbles. Shengguan Wan was uncertain. Brother Lanting, there seems to be someone running over here and waving at me. Waving? Jiang Pengji frowned. She was displeased. Let me see, she said to Shengguan Wan. She leaped onto the horse's back, which scared Shangguan so much that she almost screamed. Hold on to the rope. The white horse, which had been walking quietly, suddenly raised its hooves and galloped away. What's the matter? Jiang Pengji controlled the reins and the horse stopped precisely in front of the strange maid. The maid bowed and saluted, then said, "This servant's wife ordered this servant to inform Lang Jun to return quickly." Who knows what happened? Jiang Pengji muttered. Jiang Pengji mumbled. At that moment, Shangguan, who was in Jiang Pengji's arms, looked around. She made a sound of surprise and pointed at an empty space in the assembly. Brother Lanting, look over there. Why does the target look like a person? Target? Like a person? Jiang Pengji frowned and looked in the direction Shangguan was pointing. Shangguan did not see the expression on Jiang Pengji's face. She waited for a long time but did not hear a response. Brother Lanting? After a long time, a slightly evil voice came from behind. Do you want to play archery? Jiang Pengji curled her lips and a hint of anger flashed in her eyes. Was he trying to bully me? Without waiting for Shangguan's reply, Jiang Pengji took the bow and arrow from the horse's back. Hold on to the reins. As she spoke, she tightened her legs around the horse's belly. The originally docile white horse suddenly quivered and galloped toward the assembly. Jiang Pengji calmly took out an arrow from the quiver and drew the bow to a full moon. One had to know that this bow was a strong bow that weighed 1 stone. In this era, 1 stone was equivalent to 50 kilograms. Some adult men might be able to easily draw a bow that weighed 1 stone, but for a 12-year-old boy or girl to do it, it was a bit scary. Suke suppressed the rising anger in his heart and placed the kiwi fruit on his head. 50 steps away, the Lang Jun in a pink robe was still smiling. He took the bow and arrow from his servant and weighed it in his hand. He was slightly satisfied. It was a bow that he usually practiced with. It required half a pickle of strength to draw it to a full moon. Feng Jin, who was standing at the side, saw that he had really drawn his bow and was obviously aiming for Suke's heart. Anger rose in his heart. He stepped forward and grabbed Suke's hand that was holding the bow. At the same time, a long arrow pierced through the air, bringing with it a wind blade that scratched his cheek. In a split second, when everyone was stunned, the Langjuan's neatly combed hair was blown away by the arrow, and his black hair scattered. Thud, half of the arrow sank into the trunk of a pear tree. The exposed arrowhead trembled for a long time before it stopped. Who gave you the right to touch my people? Chapter 67. The audience in the streaming room was in an uproar. Anjing Zhuang'a, awesome, streamer. Qin Shi Huang, mama, it's her. She flirted with me through the screen, but she didn't come to marry me QAQ. It was a toxic streaming room, from the content to the audience. Fortunately, Jiang Pengji wasn't affected by it. The horse's hooves clattered, and a flash of white galloped over the wall of guards. It landed precisely in front of the Lang Jun in pink. The horse stomped on the ground with its hooves impatiently. It puffed out hot air, turned its head, and pounced on the Lang Jun's face. The horse stomped on the ground with its hooves in annoyance. It puffed out hot air, turned its head, and pounced on the Lang Jun's face. When he saw who it was, he realized it was Jiang Pengji. Her face was still full of anger. The Lang Jun raised his hand to touch his hair. His scalp hurt, and his face darkened. He waved his sleeves angrily, gritted his teeth, and asked, Lu Shi, are you trying to kill someone? Kill someone? Jiang Pengji narrowed her eyes. She held the bow in one hand and held Shangguan in the other. She sneered. That's not right. Why would I kill my own kind? I only saw that you didn't ask or tell me, and you humiliated me. If that's the case, it's impolite not to reciprocate. Riding on the horse, Jiang Pengji could completely look down on the Lang Jun in pink, who looked too gentle. She was rebellious, and her aura was fierce and oppressive. For a moment, no one dared to look up at her. If it wasn't for the strange atmosphere, Feng Jin would have laughed out loud. What did she mean by she wouldn't kill her own kind? In other words, wasn't she scolding others for not being human? Feng Jin heaved a sigh of relief. He released the Lungjuan's hand and came out to smooth things over. He couldn't let her make things worse. However, Jiang Pengji obviously didn't want to accept his kindness. She jumped off the horse and patted its body. The horse walked leisurely and elegantly to the side. Shang Wanwan finally came back to her senses. Her face was still flushed with excitement. Zheng, I remember you're going to participate in the assessment this year, right? Jiang Pengji pulled out an arrow from her quiver. She held the arrow with one hand and pointed the sharp arrowhead steadily at the Lungjuan's delicate face. What do you think will happen if I draw the arrow? Jiang Pengji asked. What do you think will happen? Everyone's expression changed drastically. Was this a sign that they were preparing to make a move? On the other hand, compared to the tense atmosphere in the stadium, the viewers in the live stream seemed to be more relaxed and eager to learn. Pretty girl warrior Ayuan, what the hell is a zero? Sorcerer girl Afong, it's similar to our ancient imperial examination system. I feel like the two have similar meanings. Very pretty girl, why do I get so excited when I see the streamer about to bully the teenagers? Bully? Abuse? She was overthinking things. She just wanted to threaten him to disfigure his face. Feng Jin's heart skipped a beat, but he didn't dare to stop her at this time. He was afraid that she would ruin his face with a shake of her hand. Dongqing's officialdom was inherited from the previous dynasty, the Xia kingdom. There were as many rules as there were hairs on a cow. There were thousands of them, but the more famous ones were those who were born as slaves, those who were physically unfit, those who were disfigured, and those who were unfilial were not allowed to become officials. You dare to do this? Zheng Bin's face turned pale. He took 2 steps back. His cowardly behavior made him even angrier. Why don't you try and you'll know if I dare or not? Jiang Pengji's eyes were cold. Zheng Bin took a step back, and she took a step forward. Compared to Zheng Bin's weak steps, Jiang Pengji was firm and decisive. If you fight me fair and square, then you're still a man. But you humiliate my page boy when I'm not here and use such despicable methods. You're really regressing. Zheng Bin could almost feel the coldness of the arrow on his cheek. He swallowed nervously. His eyeballs kept rolling down, afraid that Jiang Pengji would accidentally cut his face. The assessment was imminent. If he couldn't participate because of the injury on his face, wouldn't he feel wronged? Lu Shi, what do you want? Zheng Bin was annoyed. He didn't know when Lu Shi, who everyone could bully, had become so troublesome. You like to practice archery on people's heads, don't you? Jiang Pengji suddenly raised a smile. Everyone had a bad feeling. Coincidentally, I like it too. You should have brought your page boy with you to the assembly today, right? We'll call it even. But to prevent people from criticizing me and thinking that I, Lu Shi, deliberately hurt people, I might as well change the rules. Feng Jin saw that she was going overboard. He couldn't help but say in a low voice, Lanting, he's going crazy. Don't you want your future? If today's incident spread to the assembly, she would be infamous for being cruel. I'm not crazy. 3 arrows per person. The first arrow will be 50 steps, the second 70 steps, and the third 100 steps. The target will be the fruit. What do you think? Jiang Pengji didn't even turn her head. Her lips were still curled up in a chilling smile. Her hand that was holding the arrow didn't even tremble in the slightest. Without waiting for Zheng Bin's reply, she shouted, Su Ku, hold the fruit and stand still. Su Ku thought he could escape from the fate of being a human target. He didn't expect that it would be his Lang Jun who spoke. But he didn't hesitate for long. He put the fruit on his head and stood 50 steps away. Whoosh! Su Ku hadn't even seen when Jiang Pengji pulled the bow and shot the arrow. There was a muffled sound of the fruit piercing through his head. The exploding juice almost drenched his head. Before he could react to what had happened, he heard the capricious Leng Juan's voice again. 70 steps. Su Ku was speechless. Damn it, when did she aim just now? Because of this, Su Ku became bolder. He took a new fruit from the handmaiden and stood still after measuring 70 steps in front of everyone. Then, he shot another arrow and accurately hit the fruit on top of his head. He really underestimated his Leng Juan's archery. 100 steps. Keep going. The distance of 100 steps was too small for an ordinary person's eyesight. More importantly, the light bow that was usually used for practice couldn't shoot that far. If the wind impeded the arrow, it was possible that the arrow would fall to the ground. But it wasn't a problem for Jiang Pengji. She could accurately aim even with her eyes closed. As for the bow, the one in her hand was already considered a heavy bow. As for the legendary person who could draw a 3-pickle bow, she could do it too if she had enough time. Feng Jin was obviously aware of these details. He looked a little worried. What do these people think the assembly is? If they want to win, they should go somewhere else. They don't want to spoil the fun. But why do I feel that Lu Shi is getting bolder? Some noble ladies who didn't know the truth thought Lu Shi was still the shy and introverted boy he used to be. Wan Xiu was older, and she looked more mature and steady. She wiped the tea stains from the corner of her mouth with a handkerchief and said with a faint smile, "She's bold because she's skilled. It's obvious that she wants to step on Jingbin and humiliate him. Jingxian, don't you think so?" Chapter 68. Wei Jingxian was not in the mood, but out of politeness, she had to respond to Wan Xiu. She could shoot a fruit from 100 paces away with such a loose bow. Zheng Langjun is going to be at a disadvantage, Wei Jingxian said. Wei Jingxian chimed in, if she loses, she won't be able to get anything out of it. But if she wins beautifully, who would care about the whole story? They will only remember that Lu Lanting is good at archery and can shoot a fruit from 100 paces away. What she said was Jiang Pengji's plan. If you dare to humiliate me, I will step on you to regain my lost face. Following his usual cool style, the last arrow was clean and tidy. Whoosh! In the blink of an eye, the third kiwi fruit was shot down, right in the middle. The surroundings were silent and shocked. Even Feng Jin's eyes flickered with surprise. Your bow. Feng Jin took the bow from Jiang Pengji's hands. He knew the bow was extraordinary the moment he touched it. He tried to draw it, and the weight was beyond his expectations. Then he turned his head to look at his friend. It's at least 1 stone, right? Yes, it is 1 stone, but it's still a little light. I haven't used it for a long time, and it feels a little uncomfortable when I draw it to a full moon. Jiang Pengji thought Feng Jin must be thinking like this. Feng Jin, I want to be quiet. 1 stone? Even many men could not draw it to a full moon. Not to mention, Jiang Pengji was so relaxed and content just now. From the beginning to the end, not a single drop of sweat appeared on his forehead. The viewers in the live streaming room were confused. Was a bow of 1 stone that awesome? Zai Tiguanyan, I don't understand, but I have to pretend that I understand and think the streamer is awesome _ smiley face 3, angle, _ Misha Warrior IUN. Can someone with good history tell me what the unit of measurement is 1 stone? Yusubi Sangwashan, #haughty smile. Depending on the era of history, 1 is about 30 to 60 kilograms. I'm not sure about the host's world, but looking at the young man's expression, I think it's beyond the range of a normal 12-year-old. The audience was discussing how many kilograms the stone was equivalent to, but Jiang Pengji had long developed the habit of ignoring the live stream screen. She didn't forget her goal this time. She smiled at Jingbin naturally and said, "Now, it's your turn." Now, Jingbin was in a difficult position. If he didn't agree, the humiliation he would suffer would be far greater than when he had bullied Su Ku. He had bullied Lu Lanting's servant to vent his anger, but Lu Lanting had slapped him in the face to vent her anger. Suppressing the anger in his heart, he ignored the pleading eyes of the attendant beside him and sternly scolded him to carry the fruit 50 steps away. Compared to Su Ke's calmness, Zheng Bin's servant seemed to have stage fright. His legs were trembling, and the kiwi fruit on his head was on the verge of falling. When he saw Zheng Bin raise his bow, his legs turned to jelly and he fell to the ground. His clothes slowly became wet. Oh, he was so scared that he peed his pants. Jiang Pengji raised her eyebrows and whistled like a hooligan. She flashed her pearly white teeth at the livid Zheng Bin. Boring. I'm not playing anymore. Zhang Wenyuan, let's add a voice to the streamer's thoughts. Hey, it feels so exciting to run away after acting cool. Jiang Pengji, Zheng Bin, after she finished speaking, Su Ku and Takshu stood by their sides. The big white horse proudly followed its master's footsteps. Zheng Bin took a long time to regain his composure. He angrily threw the bow in his hand to the ground and gritted his teeth. Brute. Feng Jin looked up at the sky and the ground, but he did not look at Zheng Bin. How could he say that Lu Lanting was a girl? Wuma Jun was dumbfounded. After a while, he said, "That's weird. How did Lu Zhongqing raise such an unrestrained Lang Jun? How was he a gentleman? He was clearly a playboy. There are a lot of young and frivolous people nowadays. When she's older, she'll naturally change." Feng Jin's words had easily settled the matter. Although Lu Shi was unrestrained and unrestrained, this was also a kind of fashion, okay? In Shangyang City, the capital of Dongqing, this kind of craziness was very popular. Some Langjuns from the aristocratic families would even take off their clothes and run around in the wild. In comparison, Lu Lanting's behavior was very conservative and well-behaved. Sheng Wanwan had seen everything clearly from her horse. She did not like Zheng Bin, and the scene just now was very satisfying. I didn't know that Brother Lanting had such a vengeful side. Sheng Wanwan could not climb down, so she let the white horse follow Jiang Pengji's footsteps. Vengeful? That's not right, Wan. Your Brother Lanting is an upright person. He doesn't hold grudges. Jiang Pengji said with a smile. To others, her words sounded extremely shameless. She was trying to put gold on her face. Unexpectedly, she added, because I always take revenge on the spot. Why would I need to remember it after the event? Jiang Pengji smiled and said. She helped Sheng Wanwan down from the horse. Help me tell Jingxian that none of the men here today are suitable for her. Wei Jingxian's family background was not low, so there was no need for her to put herself at a disadvantage when it came to marriage. As long as the conditions were met, she had the right to slowly choose. For women in ancient times, marriage was a lifelong thing, so they naturally had to be very careful. I understand. Sheng Wanwan reluctantly returned to the circle of noble ladies. I'll tell Sister Jingxian in private. The matter had not been exposed yet, so it was covered with a veil. Sheng Wanwan was young, but she was very clever. Jiang Pengji only had time to deal with Su Ku after the matter was settled. Her tone was not pleasant, and it was hard to tell whether she was happy or angry. I'll tell you when we get back. On the other hand, Wuma Jun was curious about Jiang Pengji. He looked at Jiang Pengji with a burning gaze. Although he's frivolous, he's a promising young man. Why don't you introduce him to me? Jiang Pengji raised her eyebrows when she saw Feng Jin bring someone over. Brother? Feng Jin's fair face blushed. He had seen Jiang Pengji's flippant side, so he was not naive enough to think that Jiang Pengji was a good brother. Lanting, don't be silly. Have you forgotten about him? Didn't you see him in the bandit's lair? Bandit's lair? When did that happen? Wuma Jun was at a loss. The corners of Jiang Pengji's lips curled into a smile. Oh. Now that you mention it, I have some impression. Wuma Jun's eyelids twitched. He did not know what they were talking about. Yes. Fourth Lang Jun had a high fever and was in a coma. If you did not take him in, I'm afraid. Feng Jin's attitude was relaxed, as if he was talking about family matters. I wanted to introduce you two to each other, but I didn't expect things to be so busy that it took until now. Wuma Jun's face froze. Did he just get a savior? Chapter 69. However, one more savior is one more person. I can use this relationship to get to know Lu Zhongqing. I see. It was too dark at that time, so I didn't remember. Is he completely recovered from his cold now? Jiang Pengji's expression softened. There was no trace of joy. Wuma Jun cupped his hands and thanked her. Since then, he's almost recovered. If you don't mind, Lu Langjun can call me Zhengze. No matter how ignorant Jiang Pengji was, she knew that in ancient times, only family members, teachers, and close friends could call each other by their courtesy names. She was so enthusiastic right from the start. It seemed like she had ulterior motives. Because of her temperament, she was not very patient to pretend to be courteous with others. Fortunately, there was Feng Jin by her side who could mediate between them, so the conversation was not that uncomfortable. Putting aside some personal reasons, Wuma Jun's temperament was actually quite to her liking. As he spoke, Wuma Jun could not help but mention what had happened just now. That Zheng Langjun is not a kind person. You embarrassed him just now. Be careful that he will hold a grudge against you in the future and cause you trouble. It's better to avoid trouble. Lanting can completely suppress this matter just now. Jiang Pengji smiled disdainfully. I have something on him. If he holds a grudge, then so be it. I'm not afraid of him. Wuma Jun was speechless. Didn't they say there will be an evaluation recently? If his reputation is tarnished or something happens to him, he might not be able to enter officialdom for the rest of his life. Love goes small Shua net ku instead of hiding his fox tail, he came out to ask for a beating. There's no need to worry about this kind of brain. Hearing her words, Wuma Jun could not help but feel suspicious. Did she really have something on Jingbin? The gathering ended on a sour note. Jingbin, who had suffered a great loss, waved his sleeves and left in a rage. The other Langjuns did not show off their talents or try to please the noble ladies. They were all absent-minded. After the gathering ended, Wei Jingxian twisted her handkerchief uneasily. She bit her red lips and asked, did she really say that? Shangguan Wan giggled. Wan said that Brother Lanting isn't a reckless and unreasonable person. He treats Sister Jingxian so well, so he naturally hopes that you can find a good husband. The people at today's assembly, the birds and beasts in human clothing, they are all not good people. Wei Jingxian sighed while her beautiful brows knit together slightly, and she grumbled. If she was a man, then there wouldn't be so many problems. Previously, when he escaped from the bandits' lair and returned home, although his reputation was preserved, his parents still repeatedly questioned him, fearing that he had missed something and would be brought up again in the future. She couldn't help but ask her mother about Lu Shi's womanhood. Never in his wildest dreams would he have thought that his parents were insiders. Back then, the Lu residents had even come to return the token. It was only out of consideration for her reputation that they had delayed it to this day. As for today's gathering, Wei Jingxian had also expressed her opposition. After all, she and Lu Shi hadn't officially broken off their engagement. Wouldn't this put the entire Lu residents on the spot? Unfortunately, her voice was too weak, and her father had his own plans, so he didn't pay attention to her at all. Mrs. Wei's heart softened when she saw her daughter's sadness. She decided to reveal the truth to her daughter. You don't have to worry about this anymore. Your father told the Lu residents beforehand. No matter how foolish he is, he wouldn't offend Lu Zhongqing at this time. Jiang Pengji had not yet returned home, but the news of what she had done at the gathering had already spread. Just as she had expected, everyone's attention was focused on her archery skills. As for her arrogant behavior, it became a harmless embellishment. Lu Shi was sitting upright. There was a piece of bamboo paper in front of the table. He glanced at it and realized that it was Lu Lanting's birth and 8 characters. Did you have a good time at the gathering today? A father's tone suggested that he was watching a good show. Jiang Pengji complained, it was boring. A bunch of people had nothing to do, so they just sat there and mourned. Their good mood was ruined. Lu Shi almost burst out laughing. Lanting, you're right. This kind of gathering is not a place where you can have fun. It's just that you were too reckless about Jingbin. Fortunately, my son's archery skills are superb. Otherwise, he would have been at a disadvantage. Jiang Pengji sat down at the table in front of Lu Shi and smiled nonchalantly. Could it be that the brat dragged his entire family here to complain to father? As the saying goes, when you hit the young, the old comes. Could Jingbin have gone to his parents for help because he could not beat her? If he did, I would have thrown them out. Plus, they don't have the guts to come looking for trouble. Lu Shi shook his head. In fact, that was not what he was concerned about. I just want to tell you that it's easy to make enemies by humiliating people. If you don't have the confidence to kill them, you should learn to leave them some leeway. Leave them some leeway in life. It sounded like he was advising Jiang Pengji not to be so cruel in the future, but that was not what he meant. The premise of leaving them some leeway was that they did not have the confidence to kill them. If they did, they should be bold enough to make enemies. Lu Shi did not mind dealing with his daughter's aftermath. After all, he was good at it. But time waited for no man. He would grow old one day. Who would be able to help her then? She was still young and her temperament had not yet stabilized. Maybe she could turn things around. Of course I have something on him, Jiang Pengji said gently. Jiang Pengji said gently, I heard that Jingbin intends to enter the officialdom through the evaluation. However, the evaluation not only tests his filial piety, appearance, talent, and family background, but also his reputation. If his reputation is ruined, it will be difficult for him to recover. Lu Shi raised his eyebrows and asked, why do you say that? Jingbin looks like a decent person on the surface, but he has a penchant for flirting with women. He's also extremely violent. I bet he's beaten a lot of kids to death. Jiang Pengji smiled disdainfully. It's not a big deal, but it's not a small one either. If Jingbin had already entered the government, his reputation would be ruined and he would be impeached a few times. But he hasn't entered the government yet, and the evaluation is very strict on his reputation. She did not finish her sentence, but it was good that she knew what she meant. Lu Shi asked a question that he was curious about. How do you know that Jingbin has that kind of hobby? Jiang Pengji answered, I can tell if I'm not blind. Lu Shi rested his forehead on his hand. His eyes fell on the paper on the table. He suddenly asked, if that's the case, what do you see now? Father, you have the smell of incense burning on your body. I've only smelled it at Shangfu Temple because there's a special herb added to it. The clothes I'm wearing are from yesterday. Even though they're very clean, the corners of the clothes have traces of being wet and dried by the night dew. Did you go to Shangfu Temple last night to find Master Liaochen to settle the marriage between me and Jing Er? Chapter 70. Lu Shi listened quietly with a calm expression. It seemed that he had been mentally prepared for this situation. That's all right. What's next? Based on my speculation, it's just a trick. For example, Master Liaochen will tell me that I can't get married in the next few years, or else I'll be killed. Or maybe I'll say that I don't want to waste Jinger's time and ask the ways to cancel the marriage. Jiang Pengji used the knowledge she had from the ancient times. It was the safest way. In the ancient times, men could marry at a later age, but according to Dongqing's laws, if a woman did not marry at the age of 18, her family would have to pay double the tax. It was naturally impossible for the Wei clan to not be able to pay such a tax, but their reputation would be too bad and it would be very embarrassing. Lu Lanting could afford it, but Wei Jingxian could not. Master Liaochen was a capable man, and he had a high reputation among the nobles in Hejin County. He was a monk, and he never lied. The superstitious and ignorant people of the ancient times would believe his words. After all, they believed in ghosts and gods. She listened carefully and said helplessly, "That's about it. There's not much of a discrepancy. But you have to know that I'm your father, and I won't guard against you. But what if someone knows about your ability and sets a trap for you?" His daughter was smarter, more confident, and more conceited than he had imagined. Conceited people often suffered. Jiang Pengji's eyes were bright, as if there were two clusters of fire burning in them. A one-sided suppression is too boring. Only an exchange of blows can make one's blood boil with excitement. Shi was speechless. He did not expect Jiang Pengji to give him such an answer, but it was a reasonable one. What if one day I'm at a disadvantage? Jiang Pengji smiled. I'm looking forward to it. I'll think about it for the rest of my life. She smiled bitterly. I've always wondered why Master Liaochen was so sure that you would become a sovereign in the future. After all, most women in the world are weak and gentle. But now that I think about it, it's not impossible. His daughter was even more manly than a man. Her style was completely different from the rest of the family. Jiang Pengji said, "It's better to spread the news of Master Liaochen's fortune-telling as soon as possible. I'm afraid that others will maliciously harm Jing." She raised his eyelids, and there was an indescribable look in his eyes. If it wasn't for the fact that he was sure that the one who died that year was the second son of the first wife, he would have suspected that the one in front of him was the son based on what she had just said. You sure have tender feelings for the fairer sex. She openly admitted, being protective of the fairer sex is a virtue, and Jing deserves to be treated well. In a situation where there was no conflict, she had a high tolerance for women, especially beautiful and outstanding women. She had a high tolerance for them. She was speechless. It was a pity that he wasn't a son. If that's what you're thinking, I'm afraid you'll be disappointed. She said coldly, Madame Wei has other plans. Moreover, when a woman marries, her family background and her husband's appearance and talent are the most important criteria. As long as she doesn't marry into a lower class and humiliate her family, who cares about how she lives after marriage? There were too many aristocratic ladies who treated their husbands with respect as ice after they got married. The fresh and tender flowers gradually withered in the back of the house. It was because of this that Shi had the audacity to let the daughter of the first wife pretend to be the son of the first wife under the pleading of his late wife. Even after so many years had passed, he still couldn't forget the scene of his wife holding their drowned son as she sat paralyzed by the pond in the courtyard. Her eyes were filled with desolation, as if she had lost her soul and had no attachment to this world. However, her eyes were filled with deep hatred. How could she not hate? Jiang Pengji frowned and asked in a low voice, which family does Madame Wei have her eyes on? She asked in reply, at today's gathering. Can you guess who it is? Let her guess. Her guesses were all based on a certain amount of information. If she guessed based on such little information, it was very likely that she would be wrong. However, since she had set the scope to that day's gathering. In an instant, all the Langjuns flashed through her mind one by one. Is it Wuma Jun? After a while, Jiang Pengji furrowed her brows and said with certainty, but he is not a good candidate. Compared to Wuma Jun, it was better to choose Feng Jin. At least Feng Jin was a genuine genius. Not to mention other things, he was a true gentleman. Even if they could not be affectionate after marriage, he would definitely give his wife the respect and understanding she deserved. At least such a man would not pretend that he did not see it and let other women bully his wife. Wuma Jun was different. In other words, his heart was higher than the sky, but his life was fragile. Give Wei Jingxian to him. Haha. Shi paused and said, Wuma Jun is the fourth son of the emperor. Although he is not favored by the emperor, he is still a prince. Jiang Pengji looked up lazily. She said with contempt, 2 or 3 generations ago, didn't they raise horses for the previous dynasty and live in the stables? It was not that she liked ginseng and rooster or was prejudiced. She had flipped through Lu Lanting's memories. In this era where the aristocratic families were powerful, people valued bloodlines more than anything else. The Wuma royal family had the throne, but their shallow foundation had always been looked down upon by the gentry. Just by looking at the situation in the emperor's harem, she could vaguely see some of it. The crown prince, or the eldest prince, was the son of the empress. The empress was not from a prominent family, but was the second legitimate daughter of a newly ascended aristocratic family. When the emperor married her, he was still Prince Gongshan of Hejin County. In everyone's eyes, the marriage was a good match. The second prince's mother was from a merchant family. In order to please Prince Gongshan, his parents sent her to the palace to be a servant. She also worked hard. Using her pregnancy and gentleness, she slowly won over Prince Gongshuan's heart and made him indulge in her gentleness. Taking advantage of the fact that the novelty had not passed, she desperately got pregnant. She was lucky enough to have a boy in one fell swoop and gave birth to the second prince. She succeeded because of her son. When Prince Gongshan ascended to the throne, she became one of the 3 wives, Lady Hongda. The third prince was not the crown prince, but he had the highest status among all the princes. His mother came from the Feng family. The Feng family was one of the top families in Dongqing. It had been around for hundreds of years and was still standing. There were many talented people in the family. Interestingly, although the third prince's mother came from the Feng family, she was not a direct descendant. She was the daughter of a concubine. She was only a daughter of a concubine, but the current emperor had put in a lot of effort to bring her into the palace. He even gave her the position of empress. He wanted to give the position of empress to the daughter of the Feng family, but they looked down on the corrupt royal family and only respected them on the surface. It was useless for the Wuma royal family to be angry. Instead, they had to appease the Feng family to prevent them from being dissatisfied. These aristocratic families had deep roots in the Central Plains. No one knew how much power they could unleash after 1,000 years. As for the fourth prince, his background was more mysterious. There was not much news about him. It was said that he was from the Wang family of Langya. However, no one believed it. Instead, they treated it as a joke. The second prince's background was the lowest, so the emperor treated him as an abandoned son for a marriage alliance with the royal family of the northern borderline. The fourth prince's situation was rather special, but an unfavored and feared prince still wanted to marry the daughter of the Wei family's direct line of descent. Chapter 71. If it was during the founding of the country, it might be possible. But now, if Jing marries Wuma Jun, she will be laughed at. People will say that she gave up her pride to pursue wealth. Unless Wuma Jun's mother has an extraordinary background. It was like the daughter of a noble family marrying the son of a nouveau riche for a generous betrothal gift. It was embarrassing. Wuma Jun's mother and your mother were known as the twin beauties of Langya when they were young. They were 2 famous talented women in Dongqing. Lu Shi's words indirectly confirmed Jiang Pengji's guess. The Wuma royal family and the Wei family are beneath them, but the Wang family of Langya is of a higher status. Jiang Pengji searched her mind. Rumor had it that the fourth prince's mother was from the Wang family of Langya. Was it true? Jiang Pengji didn't have much of an impression of the Wang family, but she vaguely knew that they had a similar status as the Feng family. The twin beauties of Langya? That means Wuma Jun's mother is also quite famous. She's almost as famous as my mother. But how did she get into the harem? In order to get a woman from the Feng family into the harem, the emperor even promised a concubine's daughter the position of Zhao Yi. A woman from the Wang family of Langya had a similar reputation as Gu Min. She must have a high status in the Wang family. How could she get into the harem? I'm not sure, but Wuma Jun is indeed a child of the Wang family. Among the 4 princes, he has the highest status. Lu Shi smiled meaningfully. Even though the crown prince is the crown prince, his mother's family isn't that powerful. The emperor is also wary of him. He hasn't even taught him much about politics. Do you think a crown prince like that is the heir to the throne? Well, there's no point in going around in circles. Dongqing is going to fall. What's the point of arguing about that? Lu Shi's words made Jiang Pengji's mind clear. Wuma Jun is the heir to the throne? If that was the case, it was not impossible for Wuma Jun to marry Wei Jingxian. Lu Shi shook his head. That's not the case. The emperor is really afraid of him. He has been trying to weaken the Wang family in recent years, but he's failed several times. Jiang Pengji was speechless. As a martial artist, she really couldn't understand the mind of a scholar. Noticing the faint smugness on Lu Shi's face, the corners of her mouth twitched uncontrollably. Please enlighten me, father. Think about it yourself. Lu Shi was in a good mood as he left behind the 4 words. Even his facial features seemed to be filled with joy. A comment from the audience in the streaming room suddenly appeared in Jiang Pengji's mind. It feels so exciting to run away after putting on an act. She stood rooted to the ground for a long time, trying hard to suppress her curiosity, and muttered, I'm not curious. The Wuma royal family was like a grasshopper at the end of autumn. Who knew how long they could last? Instead of wasting time thinking about their internal family conflicts, it was better to think about how to get Wei Jingxian out of it. Some of the viewers in the live stream room expressed that they did not understand her thoughts and even felt some reflexively disgust. She was too presumptuous. She felt that Wuma Jun was not a good husband, so he was not a good husband. Marriage was a matter between 2 people. Maybe Wei Jingxian and Wuma Jun were a good match? As an outsider, what was she worrying about? They were not her parents. What right did they have to say anything? Host V, didn't Monk Liaochen say that I will take the path of conquering the world in the future? The current situation is unstable. Who knows when it will be a complete mess? If that's the case, will the Dongqing royal family still exist? Do you think I will be merciful? The remnants of the previous dynasty had to be eliminated because the roots had to be removed. If Wei Jingxian really married Wuma Jun, wouldn't she become a young widow? I can't bear to see that happen. The audience, after a long time, some netizens finally could not help but say something. You can hit me if you don't agree, host, maybe you are thinking too much. Jiang Pengji smiled without saying anything. She did not know if she was thinking too much, but she knew that according to the current situation, the world would be in chaos sooner or later. Others might not know, but Jiang Pengji knew herself very well. She, Jiang Pengji, was never a person who was content with her lot. During peaceful times, she could force herself to be obedient, but if the environment was chaotic, she did not mind stepping in and finding something for herself to do. Jiang Pengji seemed to have thought of something. She picked up the brush and wrote 2 words on the bamboo paper on the table. Even those who did not know calligraphy could see the viciousness and oppression in the 2 words. It was not that she had made much progress, but she had subconsciously integrated her emotions into the words. Jiang Pengji put down the brush and said with satisfaction, Su Ku, frame this and hang it in the study. Su Ku did not know Jiang Pengji well, and he could not figure out his Lungjuan's temper. Therefore, he did not dare to offend her, lest he was punished. However, when he stepped forward to clean up the calligraphy, he could not help but be stunned. A murderous aura hit him in the face. Even though the words were not beautiful, the neat and tidy handwriting revealed its extraordinariness. He could not help but murmur. His face was a little confused. Causing trouble? The words in this era were similar to the ancient words in the world of the streaming room. However, after thousands of years of evolution, the words in the world of the streaming room had become simple. If the words were written properly, they might be able to guess a few words correctly. However, Jiang Pengji's handwriting was like dancing dragons and dancing phoenixes. The audience in the streaming room became illiterate. If Su Ku had not read it out, they would not have known what she had written. You can hit me if you don't agree, damn, the streamer is crazy. Causing trouble. Cough, cough, cough. Whose trouble are you trying to cause? Are you stupid this year? Needless to say, it's definitely not that Qingbin. It's that Wuma Jun. One of them put his face forward for the streamer to hit, and after being hit once, he wants to be hit again. The other one wants to steal the streamer's wife. Men can't tolerate this. Todo fecho, every time the streamer acts like a tyrant, I can't help but think of a phrase. Xian, D, Tyrant Emperor card. This Chao Diu, ha ha ha, have you forgotten that the streamer is a girl? Even if she wants to shake, it should be a delicate body shake. San Sha Sha, a girl with a big penis and the aura of a tyrant emperor. Poor Taoists see your chrysanthemum poison, it's so boring. I really want to be pressed down on the ground by the streamer. Harder, even though she had been with them for a few days, Jiang Pengji still could not understand the magical thinking and style of the audience in the streaming room. They were all poisonous. Jiang Pengji secretly poked the system and asked hesitantly, over there. Is it because the evolution of the human brain hasn't been completed? What was so strange about the word, causing trouble? It had been the slogan of the 7th Legion for thousands of years, ever since it was established. The system looked like it had nothing to live for. Others are ginseng roosters. It's just that you don't understand their cuteness. Chapter 72. Hang up the words and kneel in the corridor for an hour. Think about what you did wrong. Just when Su Ke thought that the matter was over, Jiang Pengji suddenly added something that made him freeze. Su Ke held the paper with both hands. He was still angry, but his posture was very humble. Yes. Takshu, who was at the side, did not seem surprised when she saw that. Su Ke's performance at the assembly was outstanding. He had beaten up the gentry nobles, but what was the point? Take this as a lesson. Next time, don't be arrogant and cause trouble for Lang Jun. Takshu walked to Su Ke's side after leaving the study. She raised her eyebrows and looked serious. Any of the nobles at the assembly could have easily killed you. Su Ke pursed his lips and lowered his voice. They were after Lang Jun, but they were not as good as you. Takshu frowned and refuted him coldly. What you did before was to protect Lang Jun from being humiliated or to show off. You and I both know it. Do you still need to quibble? There are many ways to protect Lang Jun, but you chose the wrong one. If you had not stepped on them, Lang Jun would not have been so shameless as to hold a grudge against a servant. Takshu stared at Su Ke, and he suddenly felt guilty. Takshu was right. He had the best of both worlds. He would not let Lu Lanting be humiliated, and he would not let the Langjuns lose face. But why did he have to do it? In the end, Su Ke still could not accept his current identity. He turned his face to avoid Takshu's gaze. Takshu only smiled and said coldly, since you think you are virtuous and well-read, do you know what it means to die if your master is humiliated? In that era, gentry nobles had the right to have private soldiers. That was one of the main reasons why they could threaten the imperial power. The aristocratic families of this era had the right to raise private armies and retainers. This was also one of the main reasons why they had such a high status and could even threaten the imperial power. Lu Shi's reputation in Dongqing was like the sun in the sky. Even the current emperor loved and feared him. Not to mention that Lu Shi's reputation in Dongqing was like the sun at high noon. Even the current emperor loved and feared him. Su Ke had slapped the nobles' faces. Although he had made Jiang Pengji proud, he had also attracted more hatred and grudges. From the perspective of an official, what Su Ke had done before was really a bad idea. In the end, Jiang Pengji had to step in and save him from the danger of having his head split open. If it had been a slightly useless Lang Jun, he would definitely have killed himself today. Thinking of this, his face suddenly turned pale, and the wound on his cheek, which was covered with medicine, began to ache. Takshu and Su Ke each had their own thoughts, but their thoughts were ultimately restricted by this era. In fact, when Jiang Pengji punished Su Ke to kneel, she didn't think that deeply. She just felt that Su Ke, the naughty child, was seeking death happily. If he didn't teach him a lesson, wouldn't his tail be too cocky? Not every Lang Jun had the ability to save the damsel in distress like her. If this kind of behavior was placed in the 7th Corps, how could it be erased with just an hour of kneeling? Without a complete set of hellish training and a few days of sparring with the commander, it would be impossible for him to learn his lesson. It was fine for a young man to be high-spirited, but he couldn't really go crazy. He still needed to restrain himself. After turning off the live stream, Jiang Pengji looked at her plan and was lost in thought. The training of the servants in the village can be accelerated. I need to find something for Su Ke to do as soon as possible. I need to temper his temper. Even if he knew that there was a piece of jade in a stone, if he didn't polish it carefully, the jade would be destroyed. Jiang Pengji still hoped that Su Ke would be an accountant in the future. As she was thinking, she took the time to look at the points of popularity in the live stream account. For the past few days, the room was always full, and there was always an unknown number of people queuing outside. Including the scattered gifts, the points of popularity accumulated were actually quite considerable. According to the contract, the points obtained in the end had to be divided equally with the system. Therefore, Jiang Pengji's account only had 10,034 points of popularity. Later, she carefully studied the contract given by the system. A level 1 streamer, which was the beginner streamer, had a maximum audience of 3,000. If she wanted to increase the limit, she had to level up. A level 2 streamer had a maximum audience of 10,000, but she had to pay 100,000 points of popularity. 100,000 points seemed like a lot, but according to the current speed of the live stream, it was very easy to level up. The difficulty was in the subsequent levels. The difficulty would jump by a large margin, and the number of popularity points needed each time was massive. It was simply a bottomless pit that could not be filled, not to mention that there were other, tempting, treasures in the shopping center. Encountering such a system, there were only 3 words left in her mind: buy, buy, buy. If it were an ordinary person, they would probably be unable to resist the temptation and squander as many points as they had. They might even start to think of other ways to get more points. If they couldn't increase the audience limit for the time being, they would think of ways to make the existing audience pay out of their own pockets. Jiang Pengji disdained such behavior. Because she knew very well that there was never a free lunch in the world. There must be an unknown trap behind a free lunch. She could not cross the bottom line. Once crossed, it would be like taking drugs, and there would be a second and third time. She opened the character attributes panel and stared blankly at the information on it. Name, Jiang Pengji, Lu Shi, courtesy name Lanting, also known as Lu Lanting. Base strength, 5, strength fusion plus 30, gender, female, disguised as a man, replacing the deceased brother, Lu Lanting, age, 41, 12, born in the 3rd year of Tianwu's flower festival birth, the 2nd legitimate son, eldest legitimate daughter, of the Lu family in Hejin County. Fiancé, Wei Jingxian, the 2nd legitimate daughter of the Wei family in Hejin County. Specialties, 6 arts of rights, beginner, fighting, expert, analysis, expert, other abilities, temporary, attributes, charm, hidden 25, appearance, 75, channel, streaming, activated, streamer level 1, the reasoning skill had been temporarily changed to expert, and the hidden charm value had increased from 21 to 25. However, these were all useless to her. Her gaze was fixed on one thing: strength fusion plus 30. If you rely on someone, the mountain will collapse. If you rely on others, the only person you can rely on is yourself. Jiang Pengji narrowed her eyes and said, "System, when you were bound to me, I heard the sound of the fusion progress." Because the host did not have enough points, the fusion progress was temporarily halted. The final fusion was only 3%. The system quickly replied, "Yes, because the host did not have enough points, the fusion could not progress further." The so-called strength fusion was actually the soul's ability to digitize the strength it had when it was alive and integrated into the current body. This was one of the host's advantages, winning at the starting line. Jiang Pengji's physical fitness in her previous life was not something that could be reflected by the cold numbers. Jiang Pengji asked, "Can I use my own points to continue the fusion?" Chapter 73. The system paused, as if it was thinking about the meaning of her words. Then it tried to dissuade her with a pained expression. "Host, based on your current strength, it's not worth it to waste your points on the fusion. Jiang Pengji's strength in her previous life could definitely make her a monster that couldn't be killed, but what was the use of that? In this ancient world, Jiang Pengji could exchange points for more useful skills or items that could make her life better, but she was stubborn and wouldn't listen. Moreover, it was a harem system. The host was going to be the queen. Even if Jiang Pengji didn't agree with it, the system wouldn't give up on the target just because the host didn't want to cooperate. If she could perfectly fuse the strength from her previous life, then, who had ever seen an empress who could poke a hole in the emperor's head with one finger? The scene was too beautiful. It didn't dare to look at it. If you broadcast for a few more days, the system will be able to undergo its first upgrade. At that time, there will be more items unlocked in the shop. You can use your points then. It will help you adapt to this era and live a more comfortable life. Since it was called the multidimensional harem streaming system, it had more functions than what Jiang Pengji had seen. What if she used her points on something as useless as the fusion of strength? What if she needed to buy something in case of emergency? Jiang Pengji understood the system's concerns, but she scoffed at it. No matter what happens, I'm confident that I can handle it perfectly. In her previous life, without the system, she could still rise from a low-level federal soldier to a high-ranking commander. In this life, she had come to an ancient era. Would she be unable to take care of herself without the system's help? The strength belonged to her. Using points to exchange for the fusion was just a fair trade with the system. Due to the limitations of her body's genes, no matter how much she trained, she couldn't recover even 1% of her previous life strength. Her body was like a glass of water. No matter how much she poured into it, it could only hold 1 cup of water. The fusion the system mentioned was more like optimizing the body's genes. It could change the container from a cup to a water tank. That way, the container could hold more water. Just tell me if these points of popularity can help me recover some of my strength. I don't want to hear anything else. The system was forced into a corner, and could only reluctantly say, "You can, but there are too few points, and the fusion effect is very low." Zhong Sunyuan did not dislike this. She also had a faint premonition that if she wanted to fuse all of the martial power of her past life and develop the genes of this body to the same degree as before, the number of points needed might be unimaginable. However, no matter how difficult it was, she still had to give it a try. Sometimes, the system was really too much of an eyesore. It seemed docile, but it always wanted to control her and make her act according to its wishes. Between the host and the system, it seemed that the former was in the dominant position. However, Jiang Pengji tested the system several times and found that it was not the case. At present, the status between them was still relatively fair. It was a cooperative relationship, but what about in the future? The system was so desperate for popularity points that it urged her to start a live stream. What was its motive? He might as well make a bold guess. Popularity points could make the system more powerful. As the host, if he stayed where he was, what would happen then? Her choice conflicted with the system's goal. She couldn't see it now, but once the difference between the two was huge, it would be easy to deal with. Jiang Pengji had never been a puppet who was led by the nose, but she had to maintain the state of being weak even if she didn't want to. Instead of being so passive, it was better to settle for the next best thing and find a way to slowly find the strength of her past life. Jiang Pengji looked down and said, "It's okay. Many a little makes a mickle. Everything has to be done slowly." Seeing that the host was so determined, the system could not force her not to do it. It could only bear with the pain in its stomach and reluctantly agree to her choice. Jiang Pengji heard a system notification sound that was not pleasant to the ear. A virtual screen appeared in front of her. "Host, are you sure you want to use 10,000 points to continue the fusion?" A. Confirm. B. Consider. Jiang Pengji did not hesitate and clicked confirm. The points in her account were instantly emptied, leaving only 34 points. She waited for a while, but there was no reaction from her body. Just as she was about to ask what was going on, a sudden sharp pain came from the bottom of her feet. It went straight to her brain, as if 2 huge iron nails had been forcefully hammered into her body. Her knees weakened and she almost knelt on the ground. However, that was only the beginning. In less than half a breath, Jiang Pengji's face was pale from the pain. Her forehead was quickly covered in cold sweat. Her lips were a little green, the veins on her forehead were bulging, and her eyeballs looked like they were about to pop out. They were bloodshot and looked extremely terrifying. All the muscles in her body were stimulated and began to spasm crazily. Jiang Pengji felt that she had some difficulty breathing, and she could not help but change her expression. She lowered her head to look at her hands, and the corners of her lips curled into a mocking smile. Her originally thin hands were now in the shape of claws due to the spasms, and the joints of her fingers were distinct. It looked extremely terrifying, and because of the intense pain, she was even slightly out of control. She accidentally knocked over the paperweight on the table and made a sound when it fell to the ground. Outside the study, the maid, Xuanmei, heard the noise and asked softly, "Lang Jun, what are your orders?" Jiang Pengji tried her best to take a deep breath to relieve the feeling of suffocation. She secretly bit the tip of her tongue and let the blood and pain temporarily suppress the spasm of her mouth muscles to avoid suffocation. Her voice was still calm. "Nothing, I accidentally knocked the paperweight to the ground." "Xuanmei, prepare the hot soup." As expected, Xuanmei did not hear anything strange. She respectfully responded and went to order the servant to boil the water for Jiang Pengji. At that moment, Jiang Pengji was in so much pain that she curled her body into a ball. Her breathing became more and more difficult, and her face even turned a little purple. After an unknown amount of time, the sharp pain gradually subsided. Jiang Pengji resisted the pain and did not make a sound. At that moment, she had exhausted all her strength. She lay on the ground with her eyes closed. Her breathing was very weak. After another quarter of an hour, her strength slowly recovered. At that moment, Xuanmei had already returned. She reported through the door, "Lang Jun, the hot soup is ready." Jiang Pengji heard the noise and secretly rolled her eyes. She gritted her teeth and climbed up. She raised her hand and pulled her sleeve to randomly wipe the sweat on her face. "Help me bathe." Xuanmei carefully gathered her black hair and wrapped it in a handkerchief to prevent it from getting wet. Jiang Pengji pursed her lips. Her pale lips gradually became more rosy under the hot steam. She closed her eyes and leaned against the bathtub. It looked like she was taking a nap, but in fact, she was communicating with the system. Her muscles were sore and swollen. She was too lazy to even lift a finger. Chapter 74. The internet provides you with exciting novels to read. The system said helplessly, "I'm sure the host has already guessed the nature of the fusion force." Jiang Pengji nodded in her heart. Although she was exhausted, she was still very alert. "Genetic enhancement," she said confidently. If Lu Lanting's previous genes meant that she could only have 5 points of combat power, that limit would be raised after the fusion. The system was going crazy. If the host knows this, then you should also know how dangerous it is. You almost died. To be honest, as a qualified system, it had nurtured countless hosts over a long period of time. In the past, there were hosts like Jiang Pengji who put on a brave front. However, after experiencing the pain of integration, most of them would retreat and choose a gentler and more effective method. As long as you have popularity points, what can't you buy? Jiang Pengji replied with a smile, but she was not afraid. It was painful, but she would not die. If she did not have such knowledge and judgment, she would have died a long time ago in her previous life. Die? Not yet. I think I'm in a good state. The system vaguely had an ominous premonition. Jiang Pengji had said so. Could it be that she had not given up on the idea of continuing the fusion? The system's premonition was right. When Jiang Pengji was stubborn, even 10 bulls would not be able to pull her back. 10,000 points to push the fusion rate to 1%. Jiang Pengji opened the stats panel and saw that the fusion force had gone from +30 to +31. She was slightly disappointed. If she had known this would happen, she would have waited until she had more points before the fusion. Now, she had suffered for nothing. She would definitely remember this next time. The system poured a bucket of cold water on him and said, "This is only the initial stage of fusion, so the points required are not many. When the number exceeds the limit of a normal human, the points required will be more than this. Moreover, the risks required for each fusion will increase exponentially." According to the system's calculations, Jiang Pengji's combat power in her previous life was not as simple as breaking through the limit of a normal human. After living for so many years, it was the system's first time meeting such a troublesome and suicidal host. Jiang Pengji's lips curled into a faint smile. I know this better than you." There was no one who understood the pain and reaction of every gene optimization better than she did. In her previous life, she had been a genetic warrior selected by the Federation. Over the past several decades, she had passed through countless life and death situations. Her life hanging by a thread was a common occurrence for her. She had long since gotten used to it. Moreover, in her opinion, the risk was worth it compared to the bountiful harvest. Jiang Pengji looked at her palm coldly. Her heart was terrifyingly calm, without a trace of emotion. The system continued. According to the host's current streamer level, it is impossible for you to accumulate so many popularity points. The live broadcast room of a first-class anchor only had a maximum audience of 3,000. Assuming that the daily audience reached a maximum of 3,000, the fixed daily income of popularity points would only be 1,500. Even if there were some tips, the chances of encountering a tycoon would be very low. However, for the second and later stages of the fusion, the number of popularity points required would increase exponentially. Sharpening the knife will not delay the work of cutting firewood. If your streamer's level can increase by 1 or 2 levels, the points of popularity that you gain every day will be several times or even more than 10 times what you have now. The system could not understand Jiang Pengji's thoughts at all. Why was the host so stubborn? It was only a month's worth of popularity points to increase the level of the live broadcast room. It was a very worthwhile transaction. It thought that she would refute it this time, but Jiang Pengji agreed with it and agreed with it. She said in her heart, "You are right. If the streamer's level does not increase, the speed of accumulating popularity points will be too slow." The system was secretly delighted. It thought that Jiang Pengji had finally been persuaded. However, what she said next gave it a head-on blow, instantly extinguishing all its enthusiasm. Jiang Pengji asked it, "System, do you think a semi-interactive live broadcast or a fully interactive live broadcast is better? If it's the former, the initiative is still in my hands. If it's the latter, although it can stimulate the audience's enthusiasm, it can easily go wrong." Regardless of whether it was a semi-interactive live broadcast or a fully interactive live broadcast, both had a common feature. After the completion of the live broadcast task, the audience would conduct a survey and vote based on their satisfaction with the content of the live broadcast. According to the audience's satisfaction, they would receive 3 levels of treasure chests: gold, silver, and bronze. When the treasure chests were opened, the streamer would receive random rewards. Among them, there was a card that could directly increase the streamer's level for free. If the system could visualize it, its face would probably be as black as ink. You plan to increase the streamer's level based on looks? Jiang Pengji smiled faintly. Her dark eyes carried some joy. You have to believe that girls who love to smile usually have good luck. The system was about to grind its molars. It could not help but complain, "You are really confident in your luck. Girls with bad luck would not be able to smile at all." Cards that could directly increase the streamer's level for free could indeed be obtained by opening treasure chests, but the probability was only a pitiful 1%. It was still the same question. What kind of sin had it committed? How did it encounter such a stubborn host? "My luck has always been good." Jiang Pengji crossed her arms in front of her chest. Her black hair was a little damp and scattered behind her head, which made her handsome face look a little more gentle. "If I'm unlucky, who else in this world can live another life after death like me?" The system was silent for a long time. Once again, it deeply realized that its host was different from the others in the past. "Ha, host, you are capricious." The system could not help but clench its teeth. "If you don't try, you will never know how bad your luck is." Jiang Pengji did not take the system's words to heart. Instead, she provoked it. "Believe me, I am the Emperor of Luck." Jiang Pengji did not know what unlucky or Emperor of Luck meant at first. She had to thank the audience for knowing these words. Every time the stream got a little boring, the audience would use the bullet screen as a chatting platform and chat happily. In the past 2 days, they frequently mentioned words such as unlucky, Emperor of Luck, SSR, and addicted to drawing cards. Jiang Pengji would also read their bullet screen when she was bored. Over time, without a teacher, she slowly understood the meaning of these unfamiliar words. The system was angry. However, when it thought of Jiang Pengji's confident attitude and her previous actions, it felt a little creepy. Could it be that her luck was really that good? If she did not have something to rely on, she would not be so sure that she would be able to increase the streamer's level by looking at her face. The higher the level of the treasure chest, the better the item, and the higher the possibility of getting a free upgrade card. If she really had the ability to get the highest ratings every time and get the gold treasure chest, maybe she could really level up. Thinking of the bright future after leveling up, the system's gloomy mood eased a little and became a little brighter. Life was not just about the present, but also poetry and the future. It should be more optimistic. Chapter 75. After a comfortable bath, her sore limbs finally regained their strength. They were not as weak as before. Jiang Pengji changed into a simple set of home clothes and knelt in front of the bronze mirror. She let Xuanmei and Takshu play with her hair. Noticing Takshu's hesitation on her left, she could not help but open her eyes. She glanced at her and asked softly, "What's wrong, Xuanmei?" At that moment, Xuanmei's gaze fell on her loosened clothes. She could vaguely see the layers of corsets inside. Xuanmei's cheeks were a little flushed after being caught red-handed. She hesitated and bit her lower lip. Her voice was as soft as a mosquito's. "Second Langjun, Su Ku is still kneeling in the veranda outside the courtyard." "I wonder." As soon as Xuanmei said that, Takshu glared at her. She had no choice but to shut her mouth. She looked worried and timid. "Hasn't an hour passed? Why is he still kneeling?" Jiang Pengji frowned. She asked Su Ku to kneel and reflect for an hour, which was only an hour. But according to what Xuanmei said just now, did it mean that Su Ku had been kneeling outside for more than 4 hours? At least 4 hours? Takshu snorted. Her hands nimbly tied her long hair into a simple bun. It was a little loose and looked a little casual and lazy. Only Xuanmei is soft-hearted. Based on Su Ku's previous actions, it's not too much to make him kneel for a day and a night. What's more, Langjun only asked him to kneel and reflect for an hour. If he doesn't want to get up, who can hold his shoulders and stop him from getting up? Like a lit firecracker, Takshu's words carried a strong sense of dissatisfaction and anger. Jiang Pengji stood up, gathered her clothes, and tightened the outer robe. Her tone was a little comforting. "I think Takshu should change her name. How can this hot temperament be as cold as ice?" His heart was clearly burning with passion. "I know you feel unfair for me, but Su Ku is different. You can't treat him like an ordinary servant." Takshu's pretty face was tainted by Jiang Pengji's teasing. She said angrily, "Langjun seems to be enlightened now. You can really say anything. Fortunately, I know Langjun's character. If it were a girl, her soul would have been seduced." That sentence could be translated into 4 words. If I didn't marry, why would I seduce her? All right. I will restrain myself from now on. I will definitely not carelessly seduce a girl's soul. After Jiang Pengji finished talking, she turned to Xuanmei and ordered, "Go and tell Su Ku to go and rest early. Tomorrow morning, he will follow me to the village for an inspection. The weather is unpredictable and the humidity is high at night. He has been kneeling for so long. How can his knees withstand the cold? Xuanmei was perturbed and uneasy at first, but after hearing Jiang Pengji's instructions, her pale face regained some color. She knew that second Lang Jun was still the same. He was always so gentle and generous. Takshu scoffed as she watched Sun Mei leave. She was a little disdainful as she muttered softly, wishful thinking. Based on the hearing of others, they definitely could not hear what she said, but that did not include Jiang Pengji. She turned her head and asked suspiciously, "How did Xuanmei offend you? I see that you two have a good relationship." Takshu's breathing stagnated. She immediately felt a little awkward, as if she did not know how to answer her question. In the end, she simply gave up and twisted her handkerchief. She bit her lip and said, "Lang Jun is kind and pure, and you've been raised as a man since you were young. How would you know the thoughts of ordinary girls? That Xuanmei obviously has other intentions. She's thinking of seeking a higher position. Looking for a higher place?" Jiang Pengji smiled and raised her eyebrows. She lowered her voice and asked curiously, "Are you saying that Xuanmei has feelings for Su Ku?" Su Ku was only 17 years old, but in ancient times, he would have been a grown man who could start a family and start a career. He was not bad looking. Even though his face had been tattooed, it did not diminish his beauty. In Jiang Pengji's eyes, he looked even more mature. Takshu's eyes were a little dazed when she heard her straightforward guess. She seemed to be in disbelief as she patrolled her face back and forth. She was determined to find out something. However, Jiang Pengji's heart was not that easy to pry into. After a while, Takshu gave up. "What do you mean by having feelings for Su Ku? You're obviously disloyal. You think that Su Ku is a rare commodity. Even though Xuanmei and I are only Lang Juan's maidservants, there are different ranks of maidservants. Lang Juan's situation is special. When Lang Jun turns 20, his status will be even more different." At first, Takshu gritted her teeth angrily. She blushed and skipped over some of the content. Other than the masters of the Lu residence, only Takshu and Xuanmei knew Lu Lanting's true gender. The two maidservants had been handpicked by Lu Shi and his second wife. They had been raised since young and were even more particular about their daily necessities than the daughters of wealthy merchants. They were both smart. How could they not know now if they did not know when they were young? Unless there were some unforeseen circumstances, Lu Lanting's gender would have to be kept a secret. As the two maidservants who knew the truth, their future was clear. When Lu Lanting came of age, they would become her concubines. If Lu Lanting was a man, it would be a great opportunity for the maidservants. They would become the cream of the crop. Because of their friendship when they were young, even if he couldn't pamper the harem alone, he would still be able to gain some favor. Not to mention, Lu Lanting was a soft-hearted and kind person. Even if they had to work for the legal wife in the future, they would not be treated coldly. Unfortunately, no one knew better than them that Lu Lanting was not a man. She was a woman of the same gender as them. It was normal for Xuanmei to have other thoughts. She wanted to find a way out for herself. Jiang Pengji's mind was sharp. Even if she did not know much about the ancient times, she could make some logical deductions. When she connected the dots between Takshu and Xuanmei, her doubts were instantly answered. She smiled and patted Takshu's hair affectionately. Under Takshu's confused and angry gaze, Jiang Pengji teased, "Xuanmei's actions are exactly what you want. Now that she's gone, you will be the only one who can enjoy my love." Takshu was speechless. First, her pretty face blushed, then it turned green with embarrassment. When she realized that Jiang Pengji was only teasing her, she instantly realized that she had been fooled. She was so angry that her eyes were bloodshot. "Lang Jun, you're so good at teasing people. Am I a petty person in your heart?" Chapter 76. Jiang Pengji almost couldn't hold back her laughter, but she still begged for mercy with a kind voice. It took a lot of effort to quell the little girl's anger. Ahem, let's stop fooling around. Let's be serious. Jiang Pengji coughed softly. Under the gaze of the other party's watery eyes, she said gently, you and Xuanmei grew up together. There's really no need to be hostile towards each other over such a small matter. I know you're feeling indignant for me, but Takshu, both you and she are women, and so am I. I can understand why she did that. Takshu was smart. She instantly understood what Jiang Pengji meant. Her heart skipped a beat. Lang Jun, don't say anything first. Let me finish. Jiang Pengji raised her hand to stop her from speaking. Her tone was still as gentle as before. I can guess a little bit about father and mother's plans. They arranged it this way because they were afraid that you wouldn't be able to keep your mouths shut and leak my secret. They also hoped that I would have someone useful by my side in the future. However, times have changed, and the situation is constantly changing. Who can predict what will happen in the future? From Jiang Pengji's point of view, it was a sin to let two beautiful flowers wither quietly in order to hide her personal secret. She lived openly, so why did she need to hide? She was proud of her gender and never felt like a burden. He smiled and said, you and Xuanmei, I've treated you as my family since you were young. If you have someone you like or have other thoughts, just tell me and I'll arrange it for you. It's not easy for a woman to be born. From a young age, they've experienced the feeling of not being able to control themselves. Now that you've come to be my maidservants, I'll protect you and give you the right to do whatever you want. I'll talk to my father. Before Jiang Pengji could finish speaking, Takshu's eyes, which were already red, were now heavy with tears. Finally, she hugged Jiang Pengji as if she had lost her composure. She complained in her neck, Lang Jun, you promised not to seduce a girl's soul. Jiang Pengji spread her hands in her heart. She was innocent, so she would not take the blame. It was clearly a pure friendship, so why did people always think of it the wrong way? The system, who had witnessed the entire process, snorted coldly and became more and more depressed about the days ahead. Wipe away your tears. If I were a man, I'd be heartbroken. Jiang Pengji smiled and helped her wipe it with her sleeve. Takshu retorted in a low voice, Lang Jun, do you mean that your heart doesn't ache anymore? Jiang Pengji raised her eyebrows meaningfully. That's not it. It's all heartache, but in different directions. Takshu was stunned at first. She did not understand what she meant, but she quickly regained her senses. Her exposed skin felt like it was on fire. Jiang Pengji pretended that she didn't see anything. Her expression returned to normal, and she said to her, as for Xuanmei, tell her about it secretly, so that she doesn't fall for it. Although Su Kuo was a good person, he was not suitable for her. Her little tricks won't be able to subdue that person. Seeing that her Lang Jun was sitting and talking in a serious manner, Takshu quickly put away the unnecessary thoughts in her heart. She dared not continue to throw a tantrum. She didn't think much of Jiang Pengji's flattery of Su Kuo. Lang Jun, you're flattering him too much. No matter what, Su Kuo was just a servant bought by the Lu residents. He was a lowly servant, not to mention the humiliating mark on his face. What about Xuanmei? Although Takshu didn't like Xuanmei's petty thoughts, she wouldn't deliberately belittle her. She was her Langjuan's trusted servant. Her status was second only to the masters of the mansion and the head housekeeper. If she had any thoughts about Su Kuo, it would be because Su Kuo was of a higher status. However, from what her Lang Jun said, it seemed that Xuanmei was not worthy of Su Kuo. Jiang Pengji smiled helplessly, but she didn't plan to explain anything. Su Kuo looks simple and honest, but he is extremely arrogant and self-centered. Xuanmei will easily be at a disadvantage if she follows him. If she hadn't forcefully bought Su Kuo, he might have already escaped from the broker house. If the world was peaceful, Su Kuo would indeed have a hard time achieving anything in his life. After all, his lowly background was enough to send him to the 18th level of hell. However, the times made heroes. In a few years, the world would be in chaos. Who could guarantee that he wouldn't take advantage of the situation and soar to the sky? Moreover, if she really wanted to cause trouble in the future and Su Ke satisfied her, then it would be hard to say what would happen in the future. After listening to what Jiang Pengji said, Takshu didn't realize that Jiang Pengji was hiding something. She thought that was the only reason. She whispered discontentedly, Lang Jun is so considerate of her, but she's so opinionated. She's siding with an outsider. Jiang Pengji said, it's just human nature. As long as he didn't have any intention of betraying her or stepping on her bottom line, she wouldn't care about such a small problem. If he stepped on her bottom line or betrayed her, she wouldn't be so easy to deal with. On the other side, after Xuanmei got permission, she walked to the porch with complicated thoughts. She looked at Su Ke, who was motionless like a clay statue. It was late at night, and the air was chilly and damp. Compared to the warmth of the day, it was so cold that her fingertips were red. She was holding a cloak that she had made herself. The style was simple, and the cloth used was also bought by her. As Xuanmei spoke, she put the cloak on Su Ke. Second, Lang Jun has given you permission to get up. If you continue to kneel here, people will see you. Who knows what they will think of Second Lang Jun? They might say that she's cruel and doesn't care about her servants. Su Ke was already a little dazed by the night wind. Suddenly, he felt a burst of warmth and fragrance. He couldn't help but look up. He happened to meet Xuanmei's bright and gentle eyes. They were like a clear spring, and he could see into the other's heart with just one look. However, he quickly looked away and didn't dare to look directly at her. No matter how stupid he was, he knew that Xuanmei and Takshu had special identities. In the aristocratic families, they were basically the reserved servants of the young masters. Su Ke was so cold that his lips were a little numb. It's nothing. I made a mistake. I'm reflecting on myself. Xuanmei told Su Ke what Jiang Pengji had said, word for word. After he heard it, his eyes flickered a few times, and then he calmed down. Then, he sighed and chuckled. He said inexplicably, Lang Jun, you're good. He had Takshu, who was sensible, and Xuanmei, who was gentle and warm. One was hard and the other was soft. The former was ordered to remind him, and the latter represented her kindness and softness. Jiang Pengji's performance that day, as well as her magnanimous way of doing things, was admirable. Su Ke raised his hand to gather the cloak, and he staggered to stand up. He cupped his hands in front of his chest and thanked Xuanmei in a low voice. Lu Shi was the first to hear about what happened outside Jiang Pengji's yard. He was stunned for a long time. It looks like I won't have to use the wolf taming program anymore. Under the candlelight, Lu Shi pursed his lips, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. He suppressed the smile that was about to spill out. There were always two kinds of people who liked to make simple things complicated. One was the smart people, and the other was the smart people. Chapter 77. Take a look at this. If there's anything you don't understand, feel free to ask me. Jiang Pengji threw the booklet she had compiled over the past few days to Su Ke. It was filled with training plans she had made based on the situation in ancient times. In order to come up with these things, she had really racked her brain. It was not that the training plan was difficult, but it was very difficult to make it simple. For example, the training she had undergone since she was a child. All kinds of equipment were currently the most popular mainstream equipment, and the training schedule was also constantly changing according to the growth of her physical fitness. There were strict standards for her 3 meals a day, all in order to maximize the potential of her body. However, this era was too backward. There was no specially formulated nutrient solution, no professional training equipment, no suitable training grounds, and even the people who participated in the training were not even as good as the children of her era in all aspects. She had deleted and modified her own standards over and over again to come up with the finished product today. However, in her eyes, the training content was already very relaxed, but in Su Ke's eyes, it was like a sudden clap of thunder. Of course, he wasn't thinking about how amazing Jiang Pengji's training techniques were, nor was he surprised at how exceptional the training plan was. He wasn't even praising Jiang Pengji's prowess. Instead, he was regretting. Did a donkey kick him in the head last night? Why did she feel that the person in front of her was a kind and gentle lord? Lang Jun, you mustn't do that. Those servants are just ordinary people. This kind of torture, unconsciously, Su Ku voiced out his most honest opinion of the plan. As soon as the words left his mouth, his expression changed. Jiang Pengji raised her eyebrows. She understood what Su Ku meant, and her face turned green. Wait, he said, torture. The two of them looked at each other. In the eyes of the live stream viewers, they were dumbstruck. Tudu Feichio, #PickNose1. What kind of training plan did the host come up with? Young Su seems to be scared silly. Hong Yen Yin Tian, streamer, there's something wrong with this time travel script. Shouldn't the plot be about Su Ku holding the training plan with both hands and being amazed by it, then being subdued by the host's domineering aura, kowtowing to the host and becoming a brain-dead fan? Hit me if you don't agree, you're right. I'm ready to witness the historic scene of the post-starter subduing his underlings. Why did the two of them end up looking at each other dumbstruck? This scene was so King awkward. Looking at the screen full of Jiang Pengji was multitasking expressionlessly. She stared at Su Ku and the scrolling comments on the screen. To paraphrase the audience, if he didn't follow the script, it would be really awkward. Is it really that harsh? She picked up the training book that Su Ku dropped in shock. How could it become the torture you mentioned? Su Ku could hear the gloominess in Jiang Pengji's tone. His heart sank, and he realized that he might have misunderstood her. He deliberated and said, Lang Jun was born with divine strength, and your talent is different from ordinary people. The contents listed above are naturally nothing to you. However, those slaves that were bought are all ordinary people. How can the flesh of ordinary people compare to yours? Seeing him carefully flatter her and then tactfully say that the standards for the content were too strict, Jiang Pengji's gloominess dissipated. In your opinion, what is appropriate? Jiang Pengji's tone was calm, and there was a serious look in her eyes. It showed that she was sincerely asking for advice, and not trying to get even with him later. Su Ku hesitated for a while, and instead of answering, he asked, Lang Jun, why are you spending so much effort? You may have heard from the slaves about what happened to me a few days ago. I don't want to go through that kind of situation again in my life. Training these servants is to find a place for myself to settle down. Dongqing seems to be peaceful now, but even a place like Hejin County is full of bandits. If I don't have a place to settle down, I may be killed one day. As soon as Jiang Pengji finished speaking, Su Ku suddenly shook his head and retorted, Lang Jun, do you really only care about this? If it's just to clean up the bandits and protect the house, 30 to 50 people are enough. Why do you need to mobilize so many people? I'm afraid you have other unspeakable thoughts. Since you said it's unspeakable thoughts, how can I answer your question directly? Su Ku was speechless. He didn't expect Jiang Pengji to be so unpredictable. There was another burst of laughter on the screen, but this time it was not Jiang Pengji who was laughing at her. Instead, they all felt sorry for Su Ku. Hit me if you're not convinced, the longest road that Su Ku has walked in his life is definitely the streamer's unconventional ways. Cafeteria Daffin Auntie, young Su Ku, give it a rub. The streamer doesn't care about you, but Auntie cares about you. Carry me away, kiss me. The price of a blue and white *** was equivalent to a lollipop and a lover's heart, and one ** was equivalent to one live stream coin. Biyao President, young Su Ku, don't be lured away by that weird auntie. Come into my arms. Domineering President, tipped 520 kidney apples. One kidney apple was equivalent to one live stream coin. 520 kidney apples were 520 live stream coins. Apart from these two people, there were even more rewards. The screen was full of rewards that almost drowned Jiang Pengji's vision. The backstage notifications came one after another, densely packed, with no signs of stopping. Fortunately, she was expressionless, so no one saw through her. Su Ke didn't know that thousands of people had taken turns to feel sorry for him countless times. His face, which was gradually becoming more determined, showed a trace of a strange expression. His eyes were especially bright and eye-catching. I already understand what you're thinking, Lang Jun. I won't let you down. Okay, you think about it. Seeing that, Jiang Pengji already knew what Su Ke was thinking, but she didn't point it out. Afternoon, you'll go out with me to have a look. We'll have a preliminary plan, so it'll be easier to carry it out in the future. She originally planned to let Su Ke carry out the plan, but now there was a situation, and the standards she set were still too strict. One person is better than two. Su Ke knew the level of ordinary people in ancient times better than she did, so his suggestion was worth taking. According to my initial plan, we should do it step by step, increasing the difficulty of the training step by step. Just as Jiang Pengji finished, Su Ke's heart was sweating profusely. Recalling the contents of the booklet, he couldn't imagine how terrifying the intensity of the training would be if it was done step by step. It wasn't training tigers and wolves, it was clearly training people to death. You're tuning in to the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.